So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Sheffield Social Enterprise Network Conference here at the Circle. I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces here and many as yet unfamiliar that I'm sure I'll get to know through the day. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy diaries. I fully appreciate how difficult that can be, especially in a sector as under-resourced and overworked as our own. We're also joined here on the live stream by, I think we've got about 30 or 40 people signed up. So we'll be inviting questions from the live stream for the panel discussions that will follow my introduction and Phoebe's speech. Just to get started with some housekeeping, obviously the toilets are just out of here to the left and then to the left. There isn't a fire alarm scheduled, so if it goes off, there's a fire exit at the back there, and I think over there to the left, and also just out the main door if that's not obstructed. So now on to the kind of details of the conference. Living through such traumatic times, it feels like coming together with others who share our values and principles is increasingly important. I sincerely hope that the learning and connectivity that comes from today will help build the resilience in the room, with us all leaving feeling galvanized with renewed hope and energy. I feel like amongst a range of crises we face at the moment, we're experiencing a global crisis of connection. When a certain deeply problematic leader of the late 20th century said there is no such thing as society, there are only individual men and women, I genuinely don't think she could have misunderstood what it means to be human any more than she did. Nevertheless, successive government policies have perpetuated this myth. Technological advances that could bring us together have often been used to polarize us. We are fundamentally herd creatures who have been conditioned to become antisocial, distracted by our devices. However, we consistently underestimate how much we enjoy speaking to a stranger and them to us. Our addiction of accumulation has given us a false sense of security and belonging. Give us a full complement of intimate relations to other human beings and to nature, and we don't want or need that. We feel genuinely fulfilled. I hope that the content from this conference today and the connections that you make will all help to nurture and re-engage with that fundamental part of what it is to be human. Before we start, I have some exciting news about the Sheffield Social Enterprise Network to share. As we celebrate our 10th year, the network is taking a new direction in its development, leading a new consortium in partnership with the Sheffield Chamber of Commerce and the South Yorkshire Community Foundation. Together with a team of social enterprise specialists, we submitted a proposal for local social enterprise support with Sheffield City Council at the start of September. We're delighted to be able to announce that we were successful in our application and will be officially launching the Social Enterprise Growth Accelerator Program, SADACCA for short, for those children of the 80s or 90s. That was what won that one for me. I was like, that, yeah, we'll have that acronym. We couldn't really get Nintendo to work, so SADACCA will do. The SADACCA program will include free, comprehensive, flexible and targeted support for Sheffield social enterprises over the next year and a half at least. The Chamber of Commerce will offer their full membership free for a year to all social enterprises who join the program, which amongst other things includes access to 5 business advice lines, over 750 free business documents and a 24/7 HR and legal helpline. We've also brought together a team of specialist social enterprise advisors that I'm really proud to be working alongside. I think all of whom are here with us today. We have Sadiq and her team at Faithstar. We've got Chris McKay and her team at Growing Circles, Morgan Killick over there from Level Up Solutions, Mark Smith from Make Your Mark, and Fran Ferris and Jodie Marshall from Mantle. These specialists demonstrate extensive expertise in the areas local social enterprises have told us they need support with. We won't be offering a prescriptive program which channels organizations into standardized courses. Applicants will be able to self-select their consultants based on the profile of each and according to their needs, as well as engaging with the type of support that works for them. Social enterprises who sign up to the SADACCA will also have the opportunity to apply for a match-funded grant of up to £1,000, with South Yorkshire Community Foundation managing the programme. We'll facilitate paid representation from social enterprises on strategic forums we'll create, with individuals recruited through an open competitive process. SEN and the Chamber's established programme of business networking and masterclass events will continue, offering social enterprises the opportunity to attend at least 6 free events each month. Lastly, our one-to-one and group peer mentor programmes will be extended, further creating further opportunities for social enterprise leaders to work collectively, build networks and solve leadership issues across organisations. If you'd like to find out more about the programme, then representatives from SEN, the Chamber of Commerce and South Yorkshire Community Foundation will be sat on the registration desks during the lunch break to field any questions you may have. I'd like to take a brief moment now just to celebrate some of the local sector's recent successes. The format for this has been skewed a little bit because there's the 3 people that I was going to celebrate were supposed to be in the room, but I don't think any of them are actually here now. But we'll give them a round of applause anyway. So I was at the recent Sheffield Business Awards, and really proud to see that social enterprises won 3 out of 16 awards. Now, when you kind of think how minuscule our sector is compared to the overall business sector in Sheffield, to come away with 20% of the awards, I think is something that we should really be proud of. So I just want to highlight kind of Fair Share Yorkshire, which Gareth is supposed to be here. I don't think he is here. The Fair Share Yorkshire work with 42 organisations locally. They've distributed over 2 million free meals since January of 2021. They won the Community Impact Award. The Rivers Stewardship Company won the Small Organisation of the Year Award through their Revolution programme. The company is training new entrants to the environmental sector and continuing the effective stewardship of Sheffield's rivers that have been rejuvenated in recent years. And lastly, we have Chef's Counter, and I thought that was the one that was guaranteed to be here because they're catering. But apparently Chris is busy preparing the lunch still, endeavour to bring over later. So I just want to, can we have a quick round of applause for those 3 organisations? So moving on to the schedule for today, we've got an amazing programme of activity for you. The theme for today's conference is putting people and planet first. How can we develop the social enterprise movement through collective action? Alongside the main plenary sessions focused on moral imaginations and the Sheffield City goals, we've got a range of workshops for you to participate in, focusing on issues as diverse as global perspectives, local social enterprise activism, the Sheffield City goals in theory and in action, incentivising inclusion, as well as some social enterprise fundamentals for those of you at the early stage of your journey. Scattered through the day, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for networking and network weaving. More about that later, through a couple of structured sessions, as well as in the lunch break. Catering today, as I've already mentioned, is provided by Chef's Counter, who are providing a plant-based, planet and other species-friendly lunch for us all. Plastic-free Sheffield have provided us with reusable cups. We've got a beautiful business bouquet here to the side, courtesy of Roots and Bloom, a social enterprise flower farm. And today's sessions are being live streamed and recorded by fellow local social enterprise Opus Films. And we're here in a circle as well. So I'm pleased to say that everything that we've spent on the conference today, I think apart from the vegan croissants, is contributing to local social enterprise. Now on to our opening plenary speaker. When we were planning this conference not so long ago, a bit closer than I would have liked, having been waiting for the funding, I had a crazy idea to see if someone who was getting rave reviews off the back of speaking to thousands of people at the Inner Development Goals Summit in Stockholm would be open to the idea of coming to Sheffield and speaking to our little gathering of social entrepreneurs about moral imaginations. As you can imagine, I was delighted when she agreed. Phoebe is a renegade scientist, systems thinker, and social entrepreneur. She has a radical proposition that all the problems of the world are solvable today. The issue is not a lack of resource or tools or technology, but actually a misuse of imagination. She is the creator of an approach called imagination activism, a new kind of activism powered by imagination to create new possibilities and new form of action. Please put your hands together and join me in welcoming her to Sheffield. I give you Phoebe Tickell.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the thrilled to be in Sheffield today. And as you can see, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the power of moral imagination, thinking differently, and ask this question: can we unleash Sheffield's moral imagination to achieve these goals that you're going to be spending the day on today? I'm part of an organization. I started and founded Moral Imaginations in 2020. We're a not-for-profit organization, and we're just committed to building this movement of, as Terry said, activism powered by imagination to achieve the things that we currently see as being impossible. I'm going to talk to you today about what those things are. But before I start, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Phoebe. I started life as a scientist, as you can see there on the left. And over the last 8 years, I slowly transformed into an imagination activist. So that's what I call myself today. I used to be worrying about DNA codes, and now I'm worrying about like societal codes. And yeah, my work has really transformed from thinking that the changes that we want to see in the world can be done through technology, to really believing that it's all an issue of imagination. So this is what I call myself, an imagination activist, an official definition being a new kind of activist who uses imagination to create new forms of action. So people often think, we focus on changing the things we do. Obviously, that's really important. But going upstream of that, if we change the way we see the world, if we change what we believe is possible, it changes what we then go on to do. It changes what we're able to do. And this journey of going from being a scientist to an imagination activist really centers around a realization I had, which led to a bit of an existential crisis as a scientist. I'd always been someone since I was a teenager who wanted to make change. Like all of you in this room, everybody who works in social enterprise or is a social entrepreneur, I'm sure you're all driven by something that you can't quite rationalize, just like a sense of, I want to make the world a better place and I want to give whatever I can to make that happen. So I had this, and it led me into science and technology. So I really thought that the way we can make society better is through making new technology. And slowly, like as I kind of went through the motions of becoming a scientist, started a PhD, I slowly started to think that actually, I'm not sure that we need any new technology and science to make the world a better place. And actually, I ended up on this, which is that I don't think we have resource problems. I don't think it's a lack of technology or resources or even skills. I actually think what we have are imagination problems. And so I'm going to just talk you through that today, hopefully boost you with some energy for today around imagining a different future and getting that kind of hype and excitement for how things could be. And really, when we see what the world could be like and could become, it energizes us to keep on going, especially in these times of darkness and despair. And as Terry said, kind of traumatic times. There's a great systems thinker, Donella Meadows, who says, vision is the most important part of policy, and yet we leave it out. So we're going to kick off today this amazing gathering of all of you with some visioning, with some imagination, some energy, and then we'll all disappear from this conference and go on to do all sorts of actions and changes outside of this room. So to start with, showing you this iconic image. It was in 1969 that we first put a man on the moon. And until that moment that it happened, it really seemed impossible. And actually, even thinking back now, like they didn't have Wi-Fi at that time. It still seems completely impossible that they did that in 1969. And later today, you're going to be unveiling your city goals and these stories for Sheffield. It's 2023 right now. So in 7 years' time, we'll be at 2030. This happened in 1969. And it was 7 years before that JFK said, by the end of this decade, we're going to get a man on the moon. So it was in 7 years that they did that, gathered all the resource, all the people, all the energy, and it literally seemed impossible. And there's this great story about JFK walking through like the hallways of NASA, and he comes across a janitor and says, like, so what's your role here? What do you do? And the janitor says, oh, I'm helping get a man on the moon. And I love that because it's like this mission mentality of everybody, no matter what they're doing, seeing their little bit, whether you're leading a school or you're in government or you're cleaning the streets of Sheffield, all being brought in to a vision and a mission of what the future of Sheffield, what this place, what the possibility is, what could happen. So that happened in 7 years. But actually, the world had been imagining getting on the moon for about 100 years before that. So even though the action happened in 7 years, it was 100 years of telling stories about getting on the moon and building up this sense of like possibility and imagining that it's actually something we want to do. I think it was 1865, so about 100 years before, there's a book published by Jules Verne called From the Earth to the Moon, which was one of the first bits of sci-fi, one of the first sci-fi stories about doing that. And one of my friends, Rob Hopkins, who's also does this work of imagination, he talks about how, Frank Sinatra sang us to the moon, Mickey Mouse went to the moon. Like there was a lot of going to the moon before it actually happened. And this is why stories are so important, so important. Stories, imagination, building a sense of longing. So Don DeLillo, I love this quote in Underworld, who said, longing on a large scale is what makes history. Longing on a large scale is what makes history. We've got to build the longing. It's not just about the ideas and the facts. It's not just about, okay, we need we need some permaculture gardens, and this needs to happen with schools, and this is what, this is how we kind of make Sheffield a greener city. We've actually got to build up the feeling and the longing in our hearts as well as our heads in order to make these things happen that seem impossible, that actually can be done. And like part of the reason this is important is because we are in pretty dire circumstances. This year, July was the hottest month recorded ever, on record, I think. And before that, it was 2019 that the last hottest month was recorded, and it's getting faster and faster. We're on track to reaching the Paris Agreement of 2 degrees, probably not by the original 2050, but more like 2030. And the consequences of this are massive and actually quite unfathomable in a way. I think I've read somewhere that a 2-degree rise in temperature will lead to 1 billion deaths in the future. I mean, this is on all of us. We're all holding this pressure. I think 3 degrees leads to 40% of biodiversity loss. So just like losing 40% of all life on the planet. I don't want to depress you. I don't want to focus on here too much. We see a lot of this already in the news, but it's like I hope this to be a galvanizing force. Like, we're in the eye of the needle. Things have really never been as urgent as they are now. And through that urgency comes great creativity, great imagination. The imagination loves constraints. Speaking of constraints, this September the 6th, planetary boundary was crossed. Before that, I think the 5th boundary was crossed in January, and it barely registered on the news. It just was not even in the news. Probably the news was busy focusing on Kim Kardashian's most recent nipple bra or something else. But these things are happening, and yet we're not. There isn't really. Sometimes feels incredibly frustrating, because we need to actually truly reckon with the scale of the challenge and bring our most creative and energized imagination to what we're facing. So how did we get into this mess? How did we get here? I'd like you to flex your imaginations a little bit this morning, as I'm an imagination activist. I'd like you to imagine that you're a goldfish. So imagine you're born from your goldfish egg, and you're swimming around, and you're in your fish tank, and there's little fake gravel on the floor. There's a little fake castle that you can swim in and out of. It's very lovely. There's a little bubble machine. It's like, ooh, bubbles. It's a nice little place. It keeps you distracted. And as you mature as a goldfish, have we lost the gold? There we go. You died. No, here's the fish. That's it. Here's the fish tank. This is where you live. And as you grow up, you've got here all of your kind of goldfish friends. You're all growing up, and slowly you start to realize, actually, don't really like this fish tank. Why is there, I want a better castle. I want a bigger castle. I want a better bubble machine, bigger bubbles. Every day somebody comes and feeds you with fish food. And you think, well, why do we not get more fish food? Why isn't there more equal fish food for everyone? And you start to rebel. You glue yourself to the side of the fish tank. You don't go to goldfish school anymore. You've got your placard. Another fish tank is possible. There is no fish tank B. And I like to use this metaphor for where we are in a lot of the kind of systems change narrative at the moment. Green growth, conscious capitalism, sustainability. It's all a little bit, let's make the fish tank a bit better, right? And what I really think we need to do is get completely out of the fish tank and actually get to that vast and endless sea, the place where actually we don't have to worry about partitioning up resources that there's always a sense of scarcity around. And this is the metaphor I use for this sense that actually we have everything we need. We have all the resources, we have everything, all the tools, all the technology that we need. And I love this quote that really kind of summons that sense of what we need to build in order to get to that vast and endless sea. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men and women to gather wood, divide work and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And that's what I really think we need to do, is stop accepting that this is all there is possible. that these are the options, geoengineering or recycling, like these are the kinds of options that we have for changing our system. Absolutely not. It's like, just throw the fish tank in the bin. We need to yearn and really believe that a complete transformation in how we live is possible. And we're all going to play a role in making that happen. And right now, it might not be easy to envision that, especially when we're busy getting so angry about all the kind of stupid things that are happening in government. And, with some of the kinds of leaders that we're seeing, it can be really easy to start sort of focusing on just reacting to what's not working. And so this is why we need to yearn for, use imagination, paint stories, paint images of how things could be possible, how the world could look and be different. This is an image that is part of a growing movement called the solar punk movement, which I absolutely love solar punk. Little story, my Twitter handle was solar punk girl for about 8 years until I turned 30 and decided that I couldn't have girl in my handle anymore. But this movement's really exciting, and it's an art and aesthetic and kind of music. It's a movement that uses arts and music to bring alive images and stories and this kind of longing for a future that lives in harmony with nature, uses the best of technology, all the best technology that could be used in service of people and planet, and has kind of democratic, like deep democracy at the core. So it's this combination of high technology, but the bits that are good, and maybe also democratically governed technology. So it's not kind of massive monoliths of platforms like Facebook and Meta and Google, but actually technology done well and co-owned by the people for the people, with deep and widespread regeneration of land, food. So as you can see in this beautiful image, you've got a kind of green energy, solar panels, you've got the domes, the kind of biodomes and food being grown. You've got kids kind of cycling around. There are no cars. And it really just gives you this sense of like the world could look completely different, and not necessarily like a dystopian AI kind of dominated future, which weirdly is what our kind of films around the future are filled with, like Day After Tomorrow. Now I'm having a blank, but there's a lot of those films. I'm sure you can name some yourself. But actually, we need to start filling the cinemas, Netflix, children's books. We need to give the next generation and our kids a sense of what kind of future is possible, so that they grow up with the longing and with the sense of, oh yeah, I've got a mission, I've got a direction, I've got a purpose. I think the figure is like 3 out of 5 people. I saw this figure somewhere that 3 out of 5 people believe the future will be worse than the present. I talk about this crisis of hope, where it's like, especially the younger generations, there's a growing sense of depression and anxiety and climate anxiety, eco-anxiety, that our young people can't see a future that actually feels like something they'd be excited for. And I think that is a real crisis and actually probably an existential threat. So solar punk is a great example of this stuff. This is a video that I want to show you because this is another example. As I'm thinking about, on my way here this morning, I was thinking about, well, how does this apply to Sheffield? What could Sheffield be doing to paint a picture of how Sheffield could be different? I think, is Sheffield called the City of Steel? So yeah. So okay, that's the kind of old story of Sheffield, the City of Steel. What's the new story? Thank you. It's got an opinion. What is Sheffield? What's Sheffield's new story? What's the role that Sheffield plays in this solar punk future? So I want to show you a quick clip of a project that was done in the Netherlands, where basically this architect, kind of regenerative urban designer, got 1,000 trees in these wheelie tree bins. So like these big boxes with soil and trees. And he had these people kind of wheeling these trees around and taking these aerial photos of the city of Leeuwarden. I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but it's written there. The town of Leeuwarden in the Netherlands, giving you this sense of like, whoa, this could look so different. So I hope this all works in terms of tech. Bear with me. We're gonna transfer this to this laptop. I feel like even with a degree in technological science, I'm like, cannot trust me with this technology stuff. Okay. I think we were on. Yeah, where is it? Hang on. It was on the other one. Oh, was it on the other one? You already did it. Okay. There we go. Thanks. Thank you, Terry. Sorry about that. So, oh yeah, got it. Great. Okay, here we go. Okay, and okay. Can you see this? Yeah. Okay, I don't know if we've got sound. Seems like we don't have sound. Okay, wait. I thought we went to like painstaking lengths to get the sound because there's this very hopeful music. One sec. Okay. If it doesn't work this time, I'll just do it without. You can imagine it. Yeah, should be. We're on the playlist. Sorry? Is it on the playlist? Yeah, it should work. Let's see. If not, it's fine. Don't worry. I don't want to. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I think if you just refresh it, it should work. Okay. I think it should be fine. Good. Okay, got it. Perfect. So just imagine that this is Sheffield, basically. Here are the boxes and the trees. This gives you like this image straight away. That just gives you a little sense of what is possible when you exercise this imagination activism. It's not that they went and actually replaced, the streets with trees. They're doing the step before that. They're giving people that sense of what's possible, that longing. I don't know about you, but when I watch that video, I just get filled with like hope and tingles. I'm like, it was such a fast thing to do. It was really quick, probably didn't cost a lot of money, but this is the power of using imagination to actually help the collective imagine that different things are possible. Okay, so what imagination activists are driven by is what I call moral imagination. So just to complicate things even a little bit more, you've got imagination. Imagination is super important, But imagination can be used to get wealthy people onto the moon. It can be used to make legal liability companies. It can be used to create a war. But even the borders between Israel and Palestine are an act of imagination. Imagination is not biased. It can be used for the good of the whole, or it can be used for the good of the few. And so this is the power of naming what kind of imagination we are wanting to build and wanting to increase and wanting to energize. And so I call this moral imagination. It's imagination on behalf of the welfare of the whole. And I really think a lot of what we're seeing today is a failure of moral imagination. It's a failure of morality, but it's also a failure of moral imagination, being able to actually see what the world could look like, where everybody has enough, where everybody lives a thriving life, and not falling into a scarcity and competitive mindset where only some people can have enough and others just have to get by or struggle. And so this is what I wake up every morning with the energy to do. I want to keep on building people's sense of moral imagination and also highlight where there is a failure of this muscle. And all massive change that benefited people had moral imagination at the core. You've got the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King saying, "I have a dream." The suffragettes starting to imagine that actually women could have the same rights as men and have the right to vote. You've got the moral imagination that started to put animal welfare onto the map and say, actually, how we treat our non-human colleagues on this earth is important too. And you've seen the massive boom and rise of veganism in the last 10, 15 years. I think it's increased by about like 500%. So, all of these massive acts of social change had a shift in moral imagination at the core. And the last one there on the bottom right is a picture of the Wanganui River in New Zealand, which in 2017 was granted personhood. So the Maori indigenous tribe of the Wanganui had been campaigning for 100 years to say, the river is me and I am the river. So the river needs to have the same rights as a human being. And I really believe that in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see a movement where more and more rivers and mountains and national parks will be given personhood, just like companies have personhood. Companies have rights. Why shouldn't nature have rights? We get most of our value from nature, and yet we treat nature as if it's just a kind of extraction pool for us to take and destroy as we see fit. Actually, Mother Earth should also be given rights and be recognized with the same rights as a company. I don't think it's a lot to ask. And this is a movement that's growing. So this is a snapshot of an article in Country Town and House, which I would say is like the place where I least expected an article about my work to appear. But, fantastic to see that they're starting to think about, Lucy Cleland, who's their editor, said to me, like, I want to see at least like 25% of all our articles about what the world should look like in terms of a regenerative, ethical, moral future. So if Country Town and House can do it, why can't everyone do it? Why can't the government do it? Come on. And I'm not alone. There are people around the world who are doing this kind of imagination activism. This is, I think they're called Black Quantum Futures Collective, an amazing duo who also use imagination and futurism and a form of futurism called Afrofuturism that brings to life a world and images of a world where all people have the same rights. And yeah, you can go and have a look at their work as well. And this is Rob Hopkins, who I mentioned before, who dresses up as an astronaut and helps people go in his time machine to 2030 and vision the future. And we'll be doing some of that this afternoon. So we're reaching the end of my talk, or at least kind of 5 minutes or so. To go back to the fish tank, just a tiny bit of like deeper dive into what sits behind the work. It's about imagining, but it's about some deeper mindset shifts as well. So when we think about what is the way of thinking that keeps us in the fish tank, I like to think of some of these. It's not an exhaustive list, but some of the things that keep us trapped in that way of seeing the world as if there isn't enough and we've got to compete and nature is dead and we're in this rush all the time where we're all just burning out and stressed and actually the world's just getting worse. I mean, it's a pretty awful place to be, the fish tank. But some of these ways of thinking are a separation from nature, you know, seeing ourselves, seeing humans as separate from nature and actually better than nature as well. So this kind of anthropocentrism. I really think in 50 years' time, we'll look back on the way we treated the non-human world in a similar way, the way we look back now to see how we treated slaves and, you know, other humans as lesser than others. I think there's something going on that will, yeah, there's a movement there. There's this, the kind of tendency to fall into short-term thinking and not take responsibility for the future, nor for the past, you know, being in a sense of historical, just not taking responsibility for like a colonial past and also not taking responsibility for the future generations who are coming after us. You've got ways of thinking that have been drummed into us from the scientific enlightenment. So like positivist, materialist, reductionist. Positivist means we only count the things that we can prove to be true. So like things that we can see. Materialist meaning, again, like we ignore those things that we cannot kind of touch and that are tangible. So therefore everything spiritual goes out the window. It's not important. It's not made a priority at all. And reductionist thinking. So we think that the way to understand the world is by breaking it down into little parts. Actually, complex systems don't work like that. So I won't go to, this could be like a whole talk in itself, but the last one, the one I do want to just mention is the competitive kind of selfish human nature. We grow up to believe that we're inherently selfish, and actually by engaging in like the market, that's the best way to get the best out of everyone, because all humans can just compete and eventually we'll all get to a world that works better for everyone. I mean, to me, that seems completely insane. I think that's going to be pretty quickly thrown in the bin as well. So we're in the fish tank. These are the kinds of ways of thinking that keep us there. And there's a lot of really smart people who are working on this problem. Kate Raworth with donut economics, you know, the thinking there. You've got Rutger Bregman and his thinking around kind of human nature. And he also, like, I think he disproves the whole Lord of the Flies story about, you know, if you put like if there's like a group of kids that are on an island, they'll just kill each other. And he kind of disproves that by telling a story about what actually happened when I think there's a group of school children ended up stranded on an island, tropical island somewhere, and they built these like really harmonious systems and all took care of each other and took like breaks and made sure that everybody was okay. So it's like, why are we feeding ourselves this lie about our nature? And so these are the shifts that we'll go through, you know, later on in the workshop. I don't want to like dwell too much on this, but the shifts are from short-term thinking to long-term thinking, moving from that human-centric worldview to that deep kind of interbeing with nature. And I hope this gets you a bit excited, because it's like, imagine a world that was based on the right-hand side, not on the left-hand side. And imagine if we taught this in schools and kids grew up really thinking that actually this is the way we live harmoniously on a planet. We can shift from seeing nature as a resource to nature as a stakeholder and a shareholder, moving from historical irresponsibility to considering the past, our ancestors, the actions of our ancestors, and the impact that's had on other people's ancestors, and a responsibility for future ancestors, future generations, moving from competition to altruism and generosity, and moving from hierarchy to sharing power, which is so key to a network like this and the kind of movement that you're all in Sheffield. moving from that rational way of thinking to imaginative thinking, from saying we can't to actually how could we not, and getting ambition at the core and deciding where we're going and then deciding how we're going to fund it, instead of saying, well, there's not enough budget for that, so we can't do it. So that's like some of the shift, also moving to visioning, some of the shift that we need to see. And just as I was coming up the train this morning, I just added this slide just to give you like a bit of a taste of like, what could that look like in Sheffield? So here are some what if questions for Sheffield. What if there was an 100-year charter for Sheffield? What if you actually envisioned what a Sheffield with all of these kinds of things we love and the kind of world we want to live in at the core? So what if there was an 100-year charter? What if rights of nature was recognized by Sheffield City Council? What if nature is consulted as part of policy decisions? What if you had people, let's say maybe young people, so people from your schools could represent nature in decision-making? What if Sheffield takes responsibility for any role it's played in a colonial history and actually worked out how best to do the reparations, to do the deep work that's needed to really reckon with that? I see an unfinished statement. This is an invitation for imagination. What if every person has access to a well-paying job or a well-paying job, or you know, what if everybody had access to all the services that they need? What if citizens' assemblies replaced elected members in your local council, and actually citizen assemblies took the place of all major decisions? What if imagination were incorporated into school curriculums? And what if we envisioned the future of Sheffield in line with its city goals and stopped at nothing to make it happen? So that's a little taste. It's not necessarily that it needs to look like that. It might look quite different. And actually, as you go into your networking, here are your city goals, which feel like very aligned with all of those mindset shifts that we just went through. So the invitation is really to go into the networking, which is about to come next, and take a little taste of this tour through imagination, through a sense of what's possible, and the invitation to really imagine how things could be different, and to kind of take a step through the doorway of imagining that and doing that together. So I also added some images here just in case that helps. Just got some images to try and illustrate some of those city goals, as we do need to really get tangible about what those look like and vision kind of specific things. I'm going to go through all of these and back to the image of the astronaut. So this, I'm leaving you with this. This is what's possible in 7 years, to go from something completely impossible to getting a man on the moon. And if getting a man on the moon was an action of like Western kind of colonial and competitive capitalist imagination, what could be possible in 7 years with moral imagination? I love that quote to end with by James Baldwin. There's a reason, after all, that some people wish to colonize the moon and others dance before it as an ancient friend. What if we took that power of moral imagination and used that instead to power the future of Sheffield? So thank you very much. And that's our...
Well, so what I'll do just to get us started before Phoebe comes back is if we can just kind of go along the panel from kind of left to right, if you just kind of speak for just 30 seconds or so, just introducing yourself so everyone here knows who you are, that would be great.
Is the mic on? Hello.
Yeah, that's better.
Good. Hi, I'm Chris Mackay. I am Managing Director of Growing Circles. We support social enterprises with business growth. I'm also a director for SEN and a trustee with Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust.
Morning. My name is Olivier Temo. I'm the Chief Executive of SADACCA, the Sheffield and District African and Caribbean Community Association. I also chair the Sheffield Voluntary and Community Leaders Forum and co-chair the Sheffield Culture Consortium. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jodie Marshall, and I'm founder and managing director of a social enterprise called A Mind Apart. And I also co-own a consultancy business focused on purpose-driven and ethical businesses.
Thanks, Jodie. I've got one. Hello. Oh, gosh, that's loud. Good morning, everyone. My name's Shahida Speak. I'm Chief Exec of a social enterprise called Faithstar and the Chief Exec of a charity called Diversity Development Trust. I wear a number of scarves, and I can't remember who I was having a conversation with earlier, but they said that they described themselves as a professional pain in the arse, and I really like that. So I'm taking that one. That's my other role. And I also, yes, thank you. Yes, that I thought was brilliant. And I also wear a number of different scarves across the city and region as well.
Hi there, everyone. Good morning. So I come from a little bit of a different background. So I'm an academic at the University of Sheffield. I'm David Littlewood. My sort of title is senior lecturer in strategy, but that's a bit sort of deceptive in some ways. So what I do research on, what I work on, what I'm really sort of passionate and interested in is social enterprise, is kind of purposeful business, and I mean, I say kind of over the years, I've done work particularly looking at social enterprise in the global south, but more recently doing some work with SEN in Sheffield as well. Kind of other roles, activities that I'm involved with. I'm also an associate editor for a journal called the Social Enterprise Journal. Some of you might kind of know that journal. We try to have some offer some insights for practice as well. So an academic, but very much sort of working in the social enterprise space.
I've arrived just in time. I was getting distracted by someone who was asking me how they can become an imagination activist. So I feel like that's a good reason to be talking. But I'm very, very excited for this panel. I've read all of your biographies, so I didn't need to hear that. And I'm excited to kick off with a question around being an imagination activist. And I think Olivier and Jodie are both people who are up for kicking us off, at least, and then the rest of the group can follow on. But this question of, so Olivier, let's start with you. Do you count yourself as an imagination activist? And if you do, what do you find holds you back, or what are the struggles?
Thank you. First of all, a brilliant, outstanding presentation this morning. I spent the morning probably for 2 minutes talking to Phoebe prior to our presentation, and I found that we go and also reading a lot about her work. And for me, it was exactly what. Yes, thank you. It was more about what I do pretty much every single day. I know I want the society to be able to do. That means optimizing a lot of our ethical challenges, finding the best possible solution out of many. That means talking to a lot to people that we don't spend most of the time talking to, and designing what the city, what Sheffield will look like in the next 20, 30 years. It's a challenge, but it's something that we can do. But for me, it's more about changing our mindset from a vertical thinking to an horizontal thinking. And that's, for me, probably the greatest challenge. And this comes from all our own education. That's what the curriculum have designed us to do, to think vertically. And the challenge is, how do we overhaul that curriculum to project and hopefully build a better Sheffield?
Thank you. Brilliant. Over to you.
So I'm definitely an imagination activist, and anybody that knows me will say, yeah, without even question. And I guess I work in two areas. So I've got, because I've got two businesses, and both of my businesses are things that I love to do. And just they're a part of me. They're who I am, really. So the first one is young people. So A Mind Apart works with young people, and we are totally about working with them to change their mindset using creative techniques. And we do that in such a wide range of ways, from creative therapy right through to social and political theatre, which is something that I've got expertise in. And I was just talking to somebody in the network and talking about this. You know, we take young people and children and we say to them, first of all, we want to celebrate you for you, and we want you to be you, whatever that looks like. And then we want you to imagine what you would want to be in this world and what you would want to do. So I believe that before we can change things around us, we've got to value ourselves. So I have a bit of a motto for my young people where I say, before you can love anybody else, you need to love yourself. And before anybody can love you, you need to love yourself. So we work on that principle. And we are totally putting kids into environments where they would have otherwise struggled with school, because the school doesn't cater for their practical needs. It doesn't cater for their creativity. And we are totally working with them and saying, you know what? We're going to take you and we're going to do everything with you creatively. And that is going to look like a whole host of different things. But everything you do with us is going to be practical and creative, and it's going to help you to get back into that education and give you the tools. And then the other side is businesses. So I believe that my creativity goes into the business work that I do. And I really believe that businesses can be, should be, and need to be more creative. They need to be more innovative. They need to be more creative. Problem solving is about creativity, and we don't have problem solvers in businesses. And for me, I just don't get it. Like, I literally look at it and go, I don't understand it, because I'm a problem solver. You give me, if somebody tells me no, I say yes. So he says you're not going to do it, I go and do it. And I just find a way. So I think for me, I'm at a stage in my career now where I'm ready to give that back to other businesses and to really work with businesses to say, how can we really solve the problems of the world and be ethical in that? So yeah, that's what I do.
Brilliant. Full-on imagination activists right here. So I wanted to go back to this idea that we don't actually have resource problems, but actually we have imagination problems. It's not that there's not enough funding, or that people don't have the knowledge or the skills to make the world work for everyone. And Shahida, I wanted to pass to you. What do you think are the kind of biggest imagination problems that we're facing right now in the world, or perhaps just some of the imagination problems that you are focused on?
Thank you, Phoebe. I think for us, I'm just going to speak kind of Sheffield focus for the moment, and touching on the region focus. I think for probably more than a decade, we've had a deficit mindset when it comes to our social entrepreneurs, social enterprise, when it comes to our ethnically diverse communities. We've had a mindset that, and I know many people in this room will have had very similar conversations. Oh, we can't do that, there's too many barriers. Or that horrible term where people go, oh, hard to reach communities. And you go, what is that? The communities are here, nobody's hard to reach. And I think this idea of constantly othering. So I always give the example that my father was a pioneer in this city. He set up the very first BME network. He was one of the very first members of the chamber. He set up the very first mosque in South Yorkshire. So, but they were a generation of people, and they were part of the Windrush generation, whose vision for bringing their families and being a part and parcel and fabric of the city of Sheffield. I remember my dad giving me the example that they couldn't get spices. And chili was seen as a poison. So chili powder was seen as a poison. And the only place you could get it in Sheffield was the pharmacy. So you had to go and get a prescription to go and get chili powder. Whereas now, but one of the things, what was absolutely amazing about that pioneering generation that were part and parcel of Sheffield as after the Second World War, and part of the Windrush generation and that movement, was that when those communities and when those people became part and parcel in the fabric of Sheffield, actually they brought their cultures, their food, their music, their language, their agriculture, their climate, everything about it, but they shared it. Because you didn't have, if you wanted chili powder, if somebody came from Jamaica, you knew that person was bringing spices. So everybody was going to that house. Can we have a bit? And they all did that, whether it was the South Asian community, the Caribbean community, it doesn't matter which community it was. People shared, and there was a collective sense of, can we get, sharing resources. So it's a very different mindset. I think one of the things when we talk about barriers, or we talk about what are the kind of things that stop us from imagining, I think quite a lot of that was othering our communities. So I always give the example, if we are going to design policy for my children's grandparents and then apply it to their great grandkids and grandchildren, we cannot be too surprised if those children go, well, that's not relevant to me. How is that relevant to me? And we've got to start seeing our communities as citizens in terms of if you live, work or study in Sheffield, what does that mean? And it can't just be, well, if you live in the deprived part of Sheffield or you live in the posh part of Sheffield, and we talk about that, 10-year life differentiation on a single bus route, that's not acceptable anymore. And so some of the work that we do to address structural inequalities is to getting into that policy design space. Who's in that policy design space and who's designing it and what are the structures? And quite often the challenges are really in our imagination. And I'll give you a really quick example. During COVID, we were asked to lead the city's response for our ethnically diverse communities. And I had an opportunity to sit in front of the whole of the city's leadership, all of it, right across the piece. And they were all, oh, Shahida, this is great. We're going to respond to COVID. And I said, can I just stop you there? Because for you lot, this is responding to COVID. But for me, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to facilitate and act as a bridge for communities that are never going to get you in the room together in one space. So you address COVID, but I'm addressing health inequalities. I want to try and impact the infant mortality rate between Black women and white women that is 5 times higher for Black women in Sheffield in 2023, as it was in 2020. And it was also about acting as a bridge and as a facilitator to say, you can't just keep speaking to the same people. And we'll give you an example around leadership. We did a piece of research in leadership that was looking at decision makers on decision-making boards from our ethnically diverse communities in 2016 for what was then the Sheffield City region was 3%. And in Sheffield, it was 2%. The national average for our ethnically diverse decision makers right across the piece, private, public or VCF sector, was 18%. Now, I'm glad to say things are changing, things are improving, we are getting better leadership, we are getting more diverse leadership. But actually that comes at a cost at the city if we don't. We have some phenomenally talented people across Sheffield from our ethnically diverse communities whom actually they're not thriving and surviving because the city offers them business support or the city offers them an infrastructure that helps them to grow. They do it in spite of us. And actually what they then give back to the city is absolutely huge. But until we recognize and we change from that deficit mindset to that asset mindset that says, actually, how do we value every single citizen in our city? How do we nurture that talent? How do we nurture that creativity and innovation? And actually, if we lift up different parts of our community, not because resources are competition, not because it's divide and rule, but actually because it's the right thing to do, what can the possibilities enable?
Wow. Thank you, Shahida. That was, very rousing and inspiring. Does anybody else want to add to that before I move on to another question? Any responses? You don't want to build on that. I love that though, because it is, as you say, it's a mindset. And what I've said, I work with quite a few local authorities around the country. And in one of the sessions with a group of leaders of a local council, we said, if we shut the doors and said nobody leaves this room until we solve homelessness in this area, it would get solved because everyone wants to go home. You just do it. You'd be like, okay, how do we solve that? Let's actually do it. And let's assume that it's solvable. Where do you think, does anybody from the panel feel like, where that mindset could help?
Yes, no, before I just wanted to add to what Shahida just said, and I think she summarized it really well. But for me, when I look at Sheffield and the vicinity of Sheffield, it's more about listening to the diverse voices and build and listen exactly to the people that we serve. This is an exercise that we don't often do a lot, and it's exactly what is needed.
Yeah, thank you. And also, imagination loves diversity. Loves get a policeman, a child, a nurse, and a policymaker together and get them to come up with policy rather than a room of people that all look the same and we're all educated in the same way at the same place. That's how you're going to get that really rich imagination. So, David and Chris, here in this room, we've got incredible amounts of intelligence, knowledge, passion. I guess building on this theme, what are the things that get in the way, and where could imagination help, or what do you think are the big challenges that social entrepreneurs and social enterprises really face in Sheffield?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess from my side, and perhaps sort of one of the reasons that I'm here is that we have been doing some research with SEN, and I would say sort of thank you to everybody who's kind of participated in that research. And one of the things that we've been looking at there is trying to understand some of the sort of challenges that the sector faces, that sort of individual social entrepreneurs, individual social enterprises is kind of face and things. And I think maybe at sort of an individual sort of venture level, sort of some of the things that seem to be coming up might be around things like really sort of developing. They might have a sort of a great social idea, the sort of social side of the venture, a clear kind of mission, but perhaps sort of translating that into sort of finding that financial business model that really allows them to be sort of sustainable is certainly one of the challenges. I think within that there's often sort of challenges around kind of balancing, addressing the social mission, that sort of classic tension in social enterprise, achieving the social mission whilst also being sort of financially sustainable. I think maybe other things, obviously at the moment, and we've sort of talked about it a lot today, there have been sort of multiple challenges around sort of inflation and those types of elements, and obviously sort of the different types of challenges affect different types of social enterprises, obviously because the sector is so diverse. But sort of zooming out a little bit more from let's say kind of the individual sort of social enterprise, I guess for me some of the challenges that maybe the sector as a whole kind of faces, and I think it's really great to see lots of developments in this area around kind of the city goals and kind of SADACCA and everything that's happening around that, is maybe over the years we perhaps haven't been as great as we could be in terms of the different kind of key actors in terms of Sheffield's development kind of working together, also perhaps recognizing the potential, the role of social enterprise in terms of city development, kind of regional development. I think there's still maybe a ways to go in terms of people's perceptions of the sector, understandings of the sector, maybe people in kind of communities being unaware that the service that they're using is being provided by a social enterprise, that they're buying from a social enterprise. So I think there's still some ways to go in terms of that awareness. I do think that things are definitely kind of moving in sort of the right direction, but perhaps some of those things, there's still maybe scope, for instance, for instance, the university, for example, talking from kind of a university perspective, to engage further, more deeply with sort of the social enterprise sector. What are some opportunities there?
Thank you. So some of that is around kind of the reimagining the social enterprise sector, or kind of getting people to understand what that is. Great. Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm quite croaky today.
Make sure that you hold
So I get the full croak onto the microphone. I think for me, some of the things that hold the sector back is that we have a tendency to kind of operate in silos at times and not think about how you bring different aspects of the assets of our city together, really to collaborate. So you have a really strong environmental sector in Sheffield, some great organisations working through that. We have a huge kind of maker, creative, digital community sector in the city, who I think we could bring in a lot more into the social enterprise space to help us facilitate new conversations and more creative ways of thinking. And I think a lot of just bringing people together in rooms in a way that allows them to think deeply and differently can unlock new opportunities, ideas and potential. I think at times we're a bit nervous about things that are new, and when it comes to kind of commissioning from the city council or from the city region or the Mayoral Combined Authority, tenders are often written with a solution in mind, and we don't do that much kind of commissioning for new ideas, new pilots, new opportunities. And I think perhaps through Sheffield Social Enterprise Network and our new opportunities with the new contract, if we can think about ways to unlock some of that collaborative potential, I think that could really move us forward.
I love those two. Yeah, those two things is like, one is kind of that siloing, which gets people into a competitive mindset as well. Because if everybody in the network sees themselves as separate from the others, then it's, you know, it's always a competition for funding. And then the other thing you just said, now I've forgotten what the second point was, but it was really good because they both kind of applied to, yeah, kind of de-siloing and
Collaborating on the creative community in those spaces.
Yes, but also the point that you just made around being afraid of doing things kind of differently and being bold, because that's another thing. And I think there's something about bringing everyone together and visioning together and then supporting each other to make that vision actually happen, that could really help in that process. And so on that note, there's a quote by a futurist called Jim Data, who says any kind of policy statement that's useful about the future should at first seem ridiculous. And so what I'd love to invite everyone on the panel to do is, like, could you kind of, have you got any ideas for like policies for Sheffield which might seem ridiculous, and maybe you could kind of frame it as, what if, you know, like, what if Sheffield you know, recognized the River Don as a human, which is actually a project what somebody from Opus came over and told me about straight after the talk. So great, yeah. So we'll just hear a couple. So I want you as an audience to kind of I don't know how we could get you to indicate what you think about these policy statements. Maybe like if you're excited about it, give us a wave. And the vigorousness of your wave will tell us what you think. So we'll just have a bit of participation from the audience. Let's hear some policy statements for Sheffield.
So I was thinking about one this morning because on the way in, some of you might have heard about this, but Radio 4 was talking about a new tender that is out for an area to become a national forest. So they're on the hunt for a new national forest. And I was thinking about, you know, you talked about Sheffield Steel. Well, one of the ways that we're reframing Sheffield at the moment is an outdoor city. So we talk now a lot about Sheffield being an outdoor city because we go into the Peak District and, you know, we've got all this beautiful outdoor space. And I was thinking, you know, many of us in here know about the tree scenario that happened a few years ago, and we're only just coming out of that really and getting over it and maybe thinking, okay, we can work with the council again. And I wasn't even that involved in it. And I was thinking about actually how amazing would it be if we had a look at actually how does Sheffield put an application in to become the next national, you know, the national forest. And they were talking about it being the guy that was kind of heading this up was saying, actually, we want to look at urban places and we want to look at what this looks like from an urban perspective. And I've been in conversations with Kate Joseph, with other people when I was leading SEN. I was in those conversations and I still am. And we were talking about actually, what does it mean to make Sheffield greener? What does it mean? You know, how do we turn the John Lewis into something that is regenerative for the city and also considers the environment and brings nature into the city centre? So I feel like the fundamentals of these conversations are happening, but I think what we all need to do is when Kate comes this afternoon, we need to get on her and make sure she's doing an application. I'll be there.
So we've got from Jodie, what if Sheffield was a national forest city?
Yes, national forest, yeah.
Yeah, bit of a wave.
See?
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, that's going on the list. That's made it through. All right, who's going to build on that? How much more ridiculous can we get? I think we could get quite a lot more ridiculous.
I'd like to imagine a city actually where we address the issues of racial and social equity in a way that says we don't describe certain parts of our city as deprived anymore. Let's take an equitable view of our city that's because we've done it for decades and we still do it. We still design our policy. We still view it. Oh, we go, oh, the northeast of Sheffield or this part of Sheffield. Oh, the 10 most deprived, areas of the UK and all of this. And actually, at some point, we've got to reimagine our city that says we want an equitable future for everybody in our city. So let's be really ambitious and let's get rid of that 10-year life differential that everybody uses as a bloody example every blinking conference. I can't remember what number bus it is.
I'm new to Sheffield, so what is this 10-year
bus route in Sheffield from the posh end of Sheffield to the less posh end of Sheffield? But that's the quickest way I can describe it. And basic, the other way as well. Sorry. two-way thing. But depending on which way you go, there's the life expectancy is 10 years less for people.
Wow.
So that's quite, and it's getting worse because of the cost of living crisis, inflation and all that kind of stuff. And actually, I think we should be really bold and ambitious and say, actually, we want to reduce that to zero. Actually, everybody in Sheffield should have a life expectancy that's appropriate for them, not because we're knocking off a few years of somebody's life because of air pollution, because of bad housing, because of lack of transport and everything else. So yeah, if we're going to do it, let's be really bold and brave.
So what if we remove the 10-year? Yeah, clap. Wow, okay, that's a clap. What if we remove the 10-year life differential? I was about to say, what if we reversed it? But obviously that's a bit dark. Might be difficult. Tax the rich. Sorry, everybody. My anti-capitalist roots are showing. I think that's got a lot of support. Let's remove that 10-year differential. Let's remove the phrase deprived area. As if it's interesting too. It's a kind of subtle and insidious narrative technique. Oh, this is a deprived area. Is that like a natural? Yeah, it's under resourced. It's like by who? Why? There's a reason for that. Yeah. Were you going to add something?
Yeah, you're in that using that terminology, you're saying people are deprived. So it's not just a political generic. What you're saying is as an individual, you're deprived. I live in the deprived area. I'm definitely not deprived of anything. Because I will work it out,
right?
And actually, they're often the strongest problem solvers because they're the ones that have had to do everything with nothing, and we forget that. And we put them in a box and we say, oh, well, they're on benefits. We don't want anything to do with them, or they've got mental health issues. So have the rich people, right? They just hide it better and they can afford the therapy. That's the reality of it. So I just think actually, we're just putting them in a box, and these are individual people. And I have got a 1-year-old, and I do not want him growing up. And he's a 1-year-old that is half Indian, and I do not want him growing up thinking that he is in this particular side of the Sheffield, and that makes him deprived. Because my child is everything but deprived. He has got joy and love and everything that he needs. And I just think actually, as soon as you have a child in that area, suddenly everything becomes real. And so for me, there's a real realization there recently that no, these are individuals, and my child and my family are not deprived. That we are there and we love our community.
Thank you, Jodie. Olivier,
thank you. What if Sheffield had a literacy policy? It's only to expand on what Shahida just mentioned, because it's important. In our moral imagination, the use of language is quite important. In fact, for me, it's fundamental. And if you want to imagine a city where we walk together, we need to be very careful into our use of words. And that's exactly what we need to do. Then for me, I would like to see Sheffield have a literacy policy in everything that we do.
A literacy policy.
Yes.
So could we imagine, what would that look like? What would the outcome be? I'm just going to push you all to be even more
of course.
imaginative.
That's correct. That's correct. It's all about having, and that's exactly also what we did in Sheffield. Last year, in fact, we published a Sheffield Race Equality Commission. This was a conversation, a local conversation amongst community. And in that report, one of the recommendations is for Sheffield to have exactly that literacy policy so that we can build together.
Can I just come back on that?
Just briefly, yeah. 'Cause I
Yeah,
do want
just
to
really want to quickly say, so the number of ethnically diverse children in SEND or NEETs in Sheffield is of the highest proportion that it has ever been. So when Olivier talks about literacy, any child going into SEND, so we've got schools that are academised now, and that means that if they have a child that is struggling or is troublesome or whatever, well, actually, we'll just put them into the exclusion programme, or we'll send them off to SEND or send them off to NEETs or whatever. And for me, I think we should be valuing every single child. And what we should be saying as Sheffield is we want to give every young person in Sheffield the opportunity to study here, live here, work here, but that we will actually value that child for that child and not criminalise them into the prison system, not criminalise them into a NEET system, but actually exactly what you say, Olivia, invest in their literacy, invest in their numeracy, invest in them as young people. I just want to finish really one quick point is we talk about Sheffield being a city of steel. And many decades ago, in the early 70s and 80s, there was 4,000 university students in Sheffield and in excess of 40,000 plus steel workers, and they came from all over the world. So it was really mixed and diverse. Fast forward a number of decades, and we have less than 3,000 steel workers in Sheffield and the region, and in excess of probably 80,000 plus students. My question is, what are we as Sheffield going to do for the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of those steel workers? Because they didn't go anywhere. Those communities are still here. Their families are still here. So when we're reimagining what we could be doing for Sheffield, for me, it's how do we enhance those opportunities to reimagine that city of steel for those children, for those steel workers, because they haven't gone anywhere. We might be two university city, which is great, but we can't leave people behind.
Very good. What if we reimagined the steel city with the descendants of those steel workers? Brilliant. What if? We need to up the what if. There's a huge amount to say, but we need more what if statements, more ridiculous policy statements. David.
So thinking about this morning again and sort of building on some of the other points, I agree entirely with the others. A few things that sort of came to my mind. First of all, sort of in terms of the climate crisis, kind of carbon footprint, and also the kind of video that we saw about sort of trees and things. It sort of strikes me that obviously lots of places seem to sort of talk about kind of carbon neutrality, but I'm not entirely convinced that is sort of sufficient. So for me, kind of one of the what ifs would be sort of what if Sheffield as a city became kind of carbon negative, if we sort of think really about our history and obviously the steel industry, central part of the city, then historically and now, but also obviously an industry. What are the historical kind of carbon contributions of sort of Sheffield and things, and how are we not just sort of stopping our contributions now to climate change, but how are we kind of thinking about the past and addressing some of those things? So that was one.
Can we get the what do you think of that? Sheffield become carbon negative. Great. Sheffield is a sponge of carbon. Okay, it's like some vigorous. I think that's a yes.
Great. And just the other quick one that I thought of was just around sort of homelessness. I mean, COVID was an incredibly difficult time for all sorts of people in all sorts of different ways and things. But one thing that did seem to happen, at least for kind of a brief period, there seemed to be some mobilization around, helping homeless people, vulnerable people. And certainly for me, one of the things would be, what if homelessness was just eradicated in Sheffield? I don't think that is that difficult to
lots of yes to that one. I think we should take that one to Kate. Poor Kate, she's gonna be like, it's a lot that is being put on me. But the point is we all need to do it, and that's also some of what comes up with the work we do with local councils is often the residents of places are kind of saying to the council officers, like, you need to do this. And the council officers are like, well, can you help us do it? Can we do it together? Because it's not really just down to them. Chris, over to you. Sorry for best or last.
Yeah,
Take it away.
Thinking about this question, I decided it's quite hard to come up with big what if questions. The rest of the panel did very well. I think mine is something to do with kind of building in kind of a policy intention around kind of joy and natural abundance and everything that we launch or we do as a city. So thinking about how we try and move away from the kind of tragic narrative we've been describing in some of what's happened today, and really celebrate kind of positives and success, and try and approach things in a joyful way. And then I think just you used the phrase abundance, and at the Wildlife Trust, that's kind of a core part of their strategy as well. And I think that natural abundance and things that allow people to thrive is a great thing to underpin.
Well, okay, hang on. So what if she's popping off this unstoppable amount of what if policies? So like, what if joy and abundance was put at the heart of every policy in Sheffield? Could be, yeah?
Yeah, positive abundance.
Positive
I suppose you could have
abundance.
abundance of bad things, couldn't you?
Positive abundance. I like that. Abundance of positive things. What does the crowd say to that? Positive abundance. Yeah, great. Okay. Shahida, like 30 seconds.
Okay. Seeing as we're in a social enterprise conference, actually, I think we should be really ambitious. We are the thought leaders. We are the innovators and the social entrepreneurs. And actually, what if Sheffield had the largest proportion of social enterprise businesses in the UK, and we get back to our radical roots and start leading this the way we used to many, many decades ago?
Wow.
I don't actually think we're as far off as you think on that, honestly. From the research I did when I worked at Sen, I don't think we're that far off. We've got a lot in the region, more than you think.
Quite like the idea of Sheffield having a kind of rebellious nature, kind of, on the map of social enterprise. Okay, we've got 4 minutes left. Speeding through the future of Sheffield here. Okay, so my last question that I prepared previously was, we're going to pretend for a second, maybe close your eyes, pretend that we have traveled 7 generations into the future. 7 generations is about 200 years. So we're in 2223. And we're in Sheffield in this 200 year of the future. And in this future, people are living an abundant life. There is clean air, water, soil. Children are on the streets that are now completely car-free. Cars have been banned. The air is pure. You can smell the sweet fragrance of fresh trees and flowers. And there's the hum of bees and deafening birdsong in this future. And you are 5 members of this future generation who have actually been transported here today to talk to this room full of slightly dispirited and tired social entrepreneurs who are working hard in 2023, and they don't really believe that this future is possible. Could you each just give a kind of minute from this kind of persona? You are a future generation person coming back. You've got this group. What do you say to them? Anything you'd say from this 200 year in the future, positive future, knowing that these are the human beings that made it possible?
So I think from my side first, I mean, I think I would say sort of keep going, keep doing what you're doing, the sort of social change, the transformation that you want to achieve is possible. I think one of the things that you also mentioned actually in your talk was kind of some of the young people, the anxiety about the future, I mean, obviously we have anxiety around kind of climate change, but also kind of AI and various things. And I think we see that in our students at kind of university and things. So also sort of spreading the word almost that this future is possible as well to other people in your organizations, to your stakeholders, the people that you work with. So we're all kind of moving towards this. That would be me.
Thank you. Shahida, how about you?
I'm coming back to tell you that in 200 years' time, we're going to have the most racially, ethnically, neurodiverse, gender diverse leadership in the city. And actually that we're going to root and celebrate our communities so that they can stand in their own power and be and celebrate their cultures and their communities, but as part of Sheffield. So it's not extractive, it's not bringing something in, but that in different parts of Sheffield, as part of the DNA of Sheffield, what we will be celebrating in 200 years is underpinned by diversity, inclusion, equity, and clean air to start with. Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely clean air. But really, it's about celebrating those communities.
Thank you. Jodie?
So I would say dream big. I think, and I say this to my clients, I think the bigger you can dream, the further you can get and the more things you can see happen. And I think we limit our dreams so much, and we limit our vision. And you know, one of the reasons I get told no so much is because I dream big.
Do people still say no?
Oh yeah, I get
God.
consultants telling me all the time, like, "What are you doing, Jodie?"
Oh, no, I thought no might have been banned from the dictionary in 20.
Well, yeah, I'd hope so,
2023.
but no, people tell it me all the time, but yeah, we ignore it. So yeah, dream big. The bigger you can dream, the better it will be, and don't limit those dreams, even if you don't get there straight away, like, because your dream can get passed on as well.
Perfect. Olivier, shooting in from the future.
Thank you. I will say the place that I come from is a place where people mirror the nature, where people spend a lot of the time in forests, observing more and reading less. That's quite strange. They observe more. They look at connection between nature and humanity in general. And it's a beautiful place to be. And I will want you all to be there with me.
Oh, I love that. Olivia, is that little sculpture from the future too? Oh no, that's yours. Okay. It's like, it looks like a little mushroom.
I will do mine. I did bring a prop with me just in case I got
Perfect.
stuck. This was created by a child from Rotherham, and we asked them to imagine their kind of climate hopeful mascot of the future. So I'll put her by the flowers. She's a little mushroom goddess of love. And that's her superpower. Coming back from the future, then, I suppose what I would say is, wow, what a privilege to be in the room with this group of legends. You had it so tough and you kept going and you created all these amazing things, which means we will live brilliantly in the future. So give yourselves a hug. You have to do it for more than 20 seconds for it to be effective for health. Give somebody else a hug if they consent and they're okay with that. And probably give yourselves a big round of applause as well.
Oh,
You can do that. Round of applause.
Amazing. And I've heard that the NHS now prescribes hugs too in this future. Cool. And we worship forest mushrooms. So positive future is ahead. Do keep going. I think we've reached the end of our panel. Hopefully that, yeah, good dose of hope. Thank you to all our panelists. You smashed it. And yeah, we're going into workshops. I'm going to pass to you.
Thanks, everyone. That was everything. So for this afternoon's session, as you can see, we're going to be focused on the Sheffield City goals. And we're delighted to have Kate Joseph here to introduce the afternoon plenary session. Kate joined Sheffield City Council as Chief Exec in January of 2021, having spent 20 years in national government in the UK and the US. Since arriving in Sheffield, Kate has overseen the creation of ambitious, outcome-focused annual plans to guide the city's recovery from COVID, respond to the cost of living crisis, has initiated a wide-ranging programme of self-reflection and culture change in the council and partnered with leaders across the city to support an innovative project to reimagine Sheffield's future, that being Sheffield City Goals. So please join me in putting your hands together to welcome to the stage Kate Josephs.
Thank you, everyone. That's so nice. What a lovely, lovely intro. I hope you've had a really fantastic day, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to be here for most of the day, but I've already heard lots of very exciting things about imagination activism, which is a great theme for what we're going to go into. One of the nicest things I was thinking as I walked over about being asked to present on the city goals to this conference is that actually the core of this is it's not about the council. For once, it is about the council, but it's also about how we play a role alongside you, shoulder to shoulder, in service of our city. And I think we'll talk you through the city goals and the work that's led us here, what is beginning to emerge from them, and most importantly, what might come. And we'll have more of a discussion in the panel. But I think really importantly, they are about all of us and about recognising that one of the great strengths, and I was just catching up with Phoebe before, and she was saying there's so much energy and so much activism in Sheffield, and it's so you can feel it. And that's such a fantastic strength, and how we harness that sense of belief in our city and purposeful fury about the things that need to change. That is a really important driver for who we are and who we can become, I think. So, firstly, I just want to apologise. Anybody who did the City Goals workshop earlier, there might be a little bit of repetition, but I think it was only about 15 of you. So please bear with me. But I am going to talk a little bit about something you should have heard before. So we all know, you work with lots of different colleagues, with different partners, that living in our city means lots of different things to different people. That's one of the great strengths of a city the size of Sheffield, with the diversity and the rich history. What we're trying to do with the city goals, and whenever I use the we in the context of the city goals, I do not mean the council I mean we, I mean all of us, the city. So please bear that in mind. But when we're talking about the city goals, this is really about saying, how can we find a common sense of meaning and narrative, those things that draw us together rather than push us apart, so that we can move forward together as a city, live well, and really improve together in a way that harnesses all of our strengths. And you might have heard some discussion this morning about the power of story and the power of imagination and the power of saying, when you want to change something, when you want to make things better, part of the job is knowing where you start from, but also a really big part of the job is being able to imagine where you want to get to. And that's what the city goals are about. So the idea is that they can provide a way, we believe they can provide a way for everyone who cares about Sheffield to be a part of building a city that learns from its past, addresses the challenges we face now, and indeed the challenges that we'll face coming around the corner that we might not have even thought of yet, which celebrates the people that make the city and nurtures our future together. So the goals are there to set a North Star, I guess, to give a sense to any of us working in any level in the city, any job in the city, for living in the city. Where are we trying to get to? What's the story we want to tell? Not about where we were 30 years ago or about where things are now, but where we want to get to. It needs to be a story that is not just about something that can resonate with people's heads and their minds, but also their hearts and their guts, because you need that level of engagement to mobilise and organise change, as you will all know far better than me, to do what you do in the social enterprise, charity, voluntary sector in the city. You will know that, how you get things done is by mobilising. It's by getting people excited around something, even sometimes when there isn't a clear path, and getting that work happening. They are also, though, hopefully going to be a scaffold or a framework that means that it's easier for us in this city to take action in a distributed, networked, trusting way in different places and spaces, but in service of a sense of common purpose. Oh no, just the common purposes. I've messed up what I've done. It's bad. There you go. Oh, if only all my IT problems were that easy to fix. If only I could fix the council's IT by just plugging the plug in, but better. So sorry, Annie, I'm just going to try and not talk about the council. So what have we been doing so far? This has been a long time in the making. All good things usually are. Start from somewhere and build. Back in November 2021, there was a real sense coming from the City Partnership Board, which is a board that's existed for quite some time, and some of you indeed are involved in and are on, that we needed a new city strategy. We hadn't had a sense of direction. And at that point, I'll be honest, I think that the chair of the Partnership Board, Lord Blunkett, had in his mind something like the kinds of city strategies that you see still all over the country and that Sheffield's had historically. Some policy officers probably from the council and maybe from the university go away into a room, put a flannel on their head, come up with some clever things, and then say, these are our 5 objectives. And that's without wishing to be derogatory about that mode of developing a strategy. But I think the sense we had was, as a city, that's not going to work for us. We've got a very diverse and beautifully complex political reality in Sheffield. We've got 4 parties now, actually 5, if I count everybody, on the council, an administration made up of 3 parties working together. The idea that any one politician or any one person could come forward with here are 3 priorities, or 5 priorities, and that be something that everybody that would have legitimacy in the city felt naive. Equally, I think we had to learn as a city from the mistakes that we've made in the past, where potentially organisations with power or perceived power have developed strategies in absence of the people that we are here to serve. So this was all about, how do we come up with a new city strategy? It did need to, and it importantly has been informed by data and evidence, because data and evidence on this are important. We needed to update our economic evidence base for the city, and happy to talk a bit more about that, but that was also very important. And then we started, I guess, scoping and building support for this idea of city goals. What's happened over the course of the last year is really extensive citywide engagement. It's not perfect. It's probably not gone everywhere it could have gone with the best will in the world and the resources we all have available to us. I think we've done a pretty good go at it, at trying to get engagement from a very broad range of partners, citizens, community groups, institutions in the city, to say not just what we love about Sheffield and what we want to be, but also really pushing ourselves to be ambitious. And we are in that drafting, iterating and shaping phase now, which you've all been part of, some of you this morning. I think we've tried to gather insights and lived experience in different ways. We've done a survey, and we're currently out for survey again with the almost final draft of the goals. Surveys have strengths. They allow you to bring together large groups of data, and they allow you to make some informed conclusions. But we know that those surveys were not being accessed by the full range of communities in the city. So with great support from Vaz and Helen and many of you in the room, I'm sure, we also did some very targeted co-design sessions with communities and ran many workshops with stakeholders, businesses and residents. So that led us to over 4,000 data points, a huge richness of data from across the city, to enable us to come up with some draft stories and goals for the city. So what are the goals, and what's emerged from this process of discussion and co-production and debate? Firstly, the goals lay out 6 stories that we want to be able to tell in 2035. I'm sure someone will ask me why 2035, and the answer is slightly random. I think it's just a period that's far enough in the future to believe that we could actually make a difference. It speaks to the next generation, the generation of young people growing up in our city right now and the city they might inherit, but it also speaks to a recognition that some of the level of change and ambition that we have isn't going to happen in a year or 2 years. The stories are designed to be straightforward, and you will tell us, I'm sure, whether they are or aren't. The hope was that anybody in the city would actually think, I could have a conversation about this with my family, with my friends, at the hairdressers, at the football. So that's the idea that you start to create a conversation about the future of the city we want to be, perhaps a conversation that's a bit more positive and a bit more ambitious than, you know, why is there so much scaffolding on Fargate, or what is, sorry, what do we like the new paving on Fargate? Sorry, it's very raw for me at the moment, given actually it's very great paving. So I think there's something about being able to say, yes, those things matter. Frustrations with the city now do matter. I'm not trying to trivialize that, but also we're never going to get out of that self-defeating negative cycle of conversation about ourselves if we don't also say, and so, well, what would better look like? So the stories that have come out of this process, and these aren't mine, these aren't anyone else in the room who's been involved. There's things in here I love, there's things in here I hate. And that's the point. There's not supposed to be something that everybody thinks, I love all of this. There's supposed to be a set of stories that we all think, yeah, you know what, I could get behind that. I could get behind that, and I could see how my organization or my work or my energy could help drive forward towards that. So I'll just read the stories out because I'm very conscious that the font's on here. If you have any issues with the reading slides of any colour, they're not so easy. So the first one up there, and these are all equally important, is a creative and entrepreneurial Sheffield, which hopefully resonates with lots of you. I think the definition of everybody in this room is creative and entrepreneurial. And that's a great strength we have in our city through our social enterprise sector. A creative and entrepreneurial Sheffield, where we all have opportunities to invent, make, create and build in ways that grow shared prosperity and enrich our communities and ourselves. We've not shied away in this development. What's come out of this conversation is that the idea of prosperity needs to be something we talk about as a city, and that's shared prosperity. That's the idea of lifting up and lifting all communities up. A green and resilient Sheffield, where we all act faster on the climate crisis, prepare for a changing future and improve the health of our city's people and nature, recognising that our health is massively intertwined with our environment and our natural environment. A Sheffield of thriving communities, where we all belong to welcoming communities that care for one another, help us live safe and fulfilling lives and share equitably in the city's success. A connected Sheffield, where we all feel connected to each other in our neighbourhoods and across the city through technology, good transport and common causes. A caring and diverse Sheffield, where all our voices are heard and we feel the respect and celebration of each other's histories, heritage and cultures across our city. And a Sheffield for all generations, where old, young and future generations are hopeful about the future and can flourish today, regardless of background, free from poverty and oppression. So they're the stories, and we're out talking to the city now about what people like and dislike about those stories. But I hope you can all agree that they are hopeful and aspirational, and they speak to Sheffield. Within each of those stories, there are a set of goals that are slightly more tangible and measurable. And the idea of those goals is that they allow people to start to think, okay, so what would work towards these look like? How might we get there? And they represent a shared responsibility, as I say, for how things could happen in Sheffield going forward. So just to give an example, and I'll pick creative and entrepreneurial because it feels resonant, particularly with this group here today. The goals in there capture how we're building a diverse and creative local economy that attracts in talent investment, but also creating opportunities, where we have access to skills, resources and training, and where we really value and enable artists, makers and creatives to thrive by really sharing and learning from one another. So for each of the stories, there are 3 goals. And the idea is that across those 6 stories and those 18 goals, some organisations, some communities, some individuals will find kind of common cause with all of them. Some will think, yes, that is what I want to get behind and I can really see how I can make a difference. And others like myself, so from the point of view of the council and the big sort of anchor institutions in the city, the challenge to us is, so how are you going to change what you're going to do? How are you going to change your plans? How you prioritise, how you deliver, so that you're making the contribution we need you to make as an anchor in the city. So they're not the the risk here, of course, is we do all this work and all these conversations, and then they live on a website, and every so often we go back to them and say, oh, weren't those things nice? And that's where the conversation earlier around what does it mean to be, to make that kind of practice of turning imagination into action happen. So we want them to be a platform for action, and in a very open and non-top down, that's not, but in a way that is empowering, to say that actually, whether you're running an social enterprise in the city, whether you're imagining creating a new partnership, whether you're part of a group that cares about something locally, you can see how you might use these as a platform for action. And it hopefully enables a better conversation linking business, community groups, individual citizens, big city institutions, and beyond, actually. So just to give you an example, I'm now in a position where when I sit down and talk to people who might say invest in the city, I'm able to point to this, not as a council thing, but to say, we know what we're about in Sheffield. We're going to be able to, here's something you can connect into. And that does matter for our perception, the perception of the city outside. So we're in the process now of finalising the goals, or having the public conversation, on the draft goals, which the conversation that some of you involved in earlier this morning is part of. I think that runs till December the 10th, if I'm right. And then there'll be a finalisation of the goals based on the feedback from public conversations. So if we find that loads of people come back and absolutely hate something, or there's something really massive missing, or the language doesn't meet that, could you talk to an ordinary person? Could I speak to my mum about these? That's my worst test. Then we go again and we redraft. But we do need to get them to a point where they're good enough, I suppose, is the other thing. We're not going to counsel perfection on this. We have gone around a number of loops, and everybody involved in the city goals really wants to get on with it now. So please get involved, and please talk to people you might know and get them involved in participating in this work around the city goals. I'm not aware of any city or place the size of Sheffield that has tried to do something like this, which is to say, we are not going to look to our elected politicians to tell us what the future looks like. We're going to try to collectively co-design that, and we're going to look to our elected politicians and other city leaders like me to say, okay, so how are you going to get behind this and deliver? I think that's a really positive example of the kind of shift we're starting to see in the city. It might not feel it from where you're sitting, but it feels different for me, certainly working in the council, the conversation we're having around these. And it's something that I know has really provoked a really positive level of interest from others outside the city, looking to newer forms of co-design, of civic imagination, of that idea of reinventing what it means to be part of a diverse and ambitious place like Sheffield. There's also toolkits and things on the website if you want to be able to run workshops yourself. And yeah, as I say, it's been really nice to come and talk to you about something that we as a council are just part of. We're not the only people behind it, and it will, I think, survive and thrive with us, but it doesn't depend on us. It's something much more deep than that. So thank you, and really happy to take questions. I think we're going to go into the panel now. Is that right? There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. That was great. And we've got another really exciting panel lined up. I think I feel quite blessed today with all the amazing panelists and workshop facilitators. I think it's a real kind of strength of the sector that we've been able to put together such a great program today. So I'm going to hand over to John Johnson here. John is the founder of Reach Homes and Strip the Willow, and he's also a director of SEN.
Thanks very much, Terry. Thanks for everybody for sticking with us. It's been a long day, but I think you'll agree it's been fascinating so far. And I think that's going to I'm sure that's going to carry on for the rest of the afternoon. 10 years ago, in this very room, Morgan Killick and I sat down and had a conversation about starting another iteration of a Sheffield Social Enterprise Network. The vision that we had back then was pretty much what we've got in front of us now. And I think it speaks volumes that we've got a panel of this kind of caliber to talk to you, and there's so many of you here to listen. Fantastic. It's been well worth all the effort. Lots and lots of people have put into it. So a big shout out for all my fellow directors and everybody who's put stuff into making the network as the success that it is, making us a Sheffield, a social enterprise place with SAUK and all the other great things that are going on. I'll stop waffling now. I'm just going to ask this fantastic panel to very quickly introduce themselves so we know who we're talking to. We want to start from at this end, please, Phoebe.
Is it working? Can you hear me? Yeah, great. You know, hey, that's a great start. You already know who I am. I don't know what else to add, really. I run Moral Imaginations. Our organisation works with a lot of local councils and with government to increase and expand imagination and turn that into action on the ground with residents in neighbourhoods. So kind of bridging that gap between vision and action. And I'm very pleased to be here and have had an amazing day so far. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Helen Sims. I'm the Chief Exec of Voluntary Action Sheffield. We are a local infrastructure organisation supporting social action in the city, and we manage and host the Circle, the building you're in. So you're very welcome here. Thank you for a fantastic day so far. I echo your thoughts. I've had lots of really good conversations.
Don't know if this works. Yeah. I've just introduced myself. So I'm Kate. I'm the chief exec, and I'm feeling really like I wish I'd been here today and all day instead of in my management team meetings this morning. So jealous.
Hello, I'm Renee. I work for Foodworks, where I'm the CEO. We're trying to build a fair and sustainable food system for Sheffield. And outside of that, I'm also a director for Sen and for Healy City Farm.
Hi everyone, I'm James Locke. I'm a director at Opus, which is an organisation dedicated to responding to the needs of urgent systems change. And I'm also one of the delivery partner organisations for the City Goals alongside Dark Matter Labs, Citizen Network and Arup. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much. Is this working? Is this working? Yes. Difficult to tell up here. Okay, you want to hear from them, not from me. So I'm very quickly I've got 3 questions and then I'm going to throw it open to some questions from the audience. So please get your hands ready to go up. One of the things that came out of the feedback session this morning with Terry about the city goals was about deliverables. So I'm going to throw this one mainly to Kate and James to start with, but I do want to hear from all of you. No plan survives contact with the enemy. It's an old military saying. So how are these very worthy and strategic goals get translated into a meaningful platform for action that enough people are going to buy into to make them a success?
Do you want to go first or shall I go first? Yeah, okay, I'll go first. I mean, I think the first thing is to recognise exactly that point, that the work has to happen on the planning. So I can speak to what we are doing in the council, which is currently in the process of reworking and rethinking our 4-year strategic financial plan, which is a challenge for every local authority in the country. I don't think it will have escaped anyone's notice that we are in dire times from a public sector funding point of view, and that was just reinforced last week. So while that looming crisis, which I know is affecting businesses, social enterprises, charity, voluntary sector, very large swathes of the public sector is going on and is live in our minds, we are saying, right, well, we're going to set ourselves a plan for the next 4 years, and we are going to think really ambitiously about how, as a council, we navigate through that challenge in service of the city goals. So, and in terms of how that then drives change in the council, that is about the boring stuff of governance, basically, and the same boring stuff that means that when you're, every organisation trying to drive forward action, you set plans, you set goals, you drive towards them, you build capability, you make hard decisions, and you go again and you learn. And I suppose the job we've got is to have all of us take responsibility and accountability for the organisations that we have any agency within or over to do that work, but also not to not to shy away from the idea that to be able to also to be able to dream a bit and be a bit bold about things. I think in the world we're in, I won't name names, but I've been in some meetings in the last few weeks and months where we're grappling with the financial challenges across the public sector, and there's been a bit of a sense of we just can't see beyond the end of our nose. We are just going day to day to day. And the problem I have with that as leaders, and every single person in this room is a leader in this city, is that the job of leadership is to find a way through that. And the only way you find a way through that is by setting a different direction. So that's what I think we'll be doing in the council. And I guess the other thing we'll want to do is do everything we can to support, enable, and in some cases, frankly, just get out of the way so you all can get on and do your bit.
I think I would agree with all of that, Kate. That sounds like a really good set of moves. I think I would always just bring us back to the generational moment that we're in, and the nature of the challenges that we're facing require a different set of interventions than have previously been required of us. And for me, what that means is, and you'll maybe spot some of that in the goals themselves, is those goals really describe capabilities. They're not outcome orientated goals. They're not linear goals with a vertical ownership model attached to them. They are capabilities. We are going to need to build a whole new set of capabilities in the city in order to meet some of the challenges ahead, but also to achieve these goals. So I would push us into that space. You should be looking at those goals as social entrepreneurs, as social enterprises, and you should be thinking to yourself, what are the partnerships? What are the collaborations? What are the new forms of infrastructure? What are the new products that we need to create in order to make that goal a reality? And you will find that you cannot do those on your own. And I think this is a really, really important part of the goals, which is creating a frame for collaboration. I think at the beginning, the things I would point to, and Kate's rightly named these, is a question about governance. And I love governance. I think it's fascinating, right? It sounds kind of boring, but it's actually about how do we organize and how do we make decisions? And how does that process of organizing and that process of making decisions govern how resource and capability flows through the city? Now, that is an absolutely amazing conversation to be a part of. And I think what's great about the city goals is that opens up that conversation for more people, like the people in this room, to take part in as we move forward. I think the other really, really important thing we need to hold that is almost like a dependency to doing any of the goals, which is how do we create the conditions to have honest conversations in the city? How do we tell the stories of the city? How do we manage the kind of 2 points of justice in storytelling? One is who's telling the story, and the other is who is interpreting the story. And how do we create the spaces for people to come together in the city, experience difference, and find common cause?
Anybody like to add anything else? I've got a follow up on that when you've done.
From my point of view, leading voluntary action in Sheffield, I think I really welcome this as a blueprint, but I recognise the work we have to do now is to imagine what this could look like. So from my organisational point of view, my staff team have been training in the art of participation. Like, actually, we need more people involved in imagining this, right? We've got a lot of collective imagination, but we're not tapping into it. So as an organisation, that's really important to us. We've been training in the skills to do that, to host those kind of conversations. And that includes some of the conflict that will come with some of those conversations and managing the conflict and being realistic about that as we go into it, because through imagining it, we can then start to build it. And I think we need to model it and demonstrate it at different scales as well. So we might need different sorts of collaborations to do that. This isn't going to be a traditionally funded piece of work that we do. We need to think fundamentally differently about how we might start to demonstrate things that are radically different. So that's how kind of I'm thinking and my organisation is thinking.
So Phoebe, very quickly, are you aware of anywhere else that's tried anything on this kind of scale, and what have the pluses or minuses been?
So as I was listening, I was thinking of obviously the sustainable development goals, and I think there's a lot to learn about how not to do goals with those, because we're nearing, I think we're nearing the time when they're going to expire. And yeah, it's sort of, it's not just that we haven't achieved them, it's also very difficult to even prove either way whether they have been achieved or not. And I really resonate with what's been said on the panel so far, in terms of if you want to go to a different place, let's go differently, which is one of my favorite quotes by someone called Nora Bateson. So it's not just about doing something different, it's about how you do it and doing it differently. I mean, the local council that Moral Imaginations has done the most work with is Camden Council, and they've got 4 missions. I can see some people nodding, so maybe that's familiar already. They're having the same conversation about how do you translate a big lofty goal, which is, something like, having more diverse leaders, into something specific. And so some of the work that we're doing is around how to translate that into kind of boring governance, operational stuff. So yeah, I love what James said as well, is love governance, because actually it's not boring. It's like, it's where the rubber hits the road. What I find really exciting about this kind of project is the huge amount of openness for doing things in a different way, because it's so unprescribed. It's not saying we need to do this and this and here's a 10-year plan. It's saying here's the vision, let's co-create how we do it together. And something I think is really important for achieving big visions like this is to get really mixed and diverse groups in terms of putting it into practice. So as I said this morning, getting a school teacher and a child and a policeman and a nurse and a council officer together to actually do this kind of cross silo work. That's where imagination can really be released. So, but other than that, I think, I'm really excited to see what happens over the next 10 years.
Thank you. I mean, we've got 70-odd race cars here, all revved up, hopefully after today, waiting to hit that start line and be part of this process. So Kate, closing question on this bit for you. How are you going to manage that start so that we don't end up with a pile up on the first corner?
Well, the first thing I'll say is we're going to manage that. Is the first thing. And I think this is a really important thing. So some people in the room have heard me say this before, but I'll say it again because it resonates with your race car analogy. If you think about us all as, instead of race cars, we'll think about ourselves as boats. Sorry, guys. I think you can guess the kind of type of boat that I'm in command of. It's got lots of great strengths and it's very solid and it won't change, but it won't change very easily. But it's slow to get out of the dock. And so some of the strength that we have in the city is a lot of really speedy, zippy speedboats and little fishing trawlers that can get out and get moving. And I suppose part of the power of the city goals is to say, what if we all know where the destination is, then some of the smaller boats can just get on, and they might want to form a flotilla. Sorry, I love an analogy. They might want to form a flotilla to support each other to do that. But actually, and we'll catch up in the council. The oil tanker will catch up. The oil tanker of the NHS will catch up, and we'll catch up, and we'll be inspired to catch up because we'll see the example that's being set to us by our partners in the city. But once we've got the engine going, we'll move fast, because that's the nature of those sorts of boats. So sorry, that's a really painful analogy, but I guess that's the point. What there won't be is a sort of, you know, a ceremonial cutting of the ribbon and now you have permission to go ahead. I will be saying, well, actually, we need to, once the goals are finalised by, you know, the process that's been gone through across all these partners, they'll be out in the world and they will be, you know, free to move. We will need to put some governance, to come back to James's point, around it as a city. We'll need to think about what's the successor to the Sheffield City Partnership Board. How do we make sure that there is some form of oversight to make sure that we're making progress and that we're protecting the legacy of what's in here. But yeah, I think I would say hopefully this will enable conversations that maybe are happening, but perhaps in a less focused way, and it will hopefully provide good ways to connect and make choices, because obviously that's the other thing we're all dealing with every day, just making hard choices about which thing to prioritize and what to spend our time on and where to make a bet and where to take a risk.
And where do you see that oversight coming from that you mentioned?
Well, I mean, I think there's a really important role, obviously, for the democratically elected council. I mean, we have a democracy in our country, and we have a committee system which is new and still finding its feet. But certainly, I can say that from the point of view of a senior council officer, we are in, you know, more and more information, evidence, data is out in the public domain than it has been before. Discussions are happening. It doesn't mean that everybody will always agree with everything, but hopefully what we'll have, the council will oversee the work of the council, and the city goals will be owned by the city. And so groups like this, or subgroups within this, or entrepreneurs within the city shouldn't need to have permission from the council to get on and do. That's the point. So I think sometimes we'll need to be really open to reflecting on notions of oversight as getting the balance between, you know, absolutely really good, you know, good use of public money, transparency, openness, adherence to the law, adherence to our priorities as a city, but also recognizing that there shouldn't be just one group that has all of the power.
Good, exciting times.
It is. It's hard because it's really different. It's really, particularly for someone in, and I credit to elected members, the leader, the deputy, the leaders of all three parties in the administration. They're walking into this not knowing what the answer will be and saying, yes, we'll go with it. That's quite a shift. And, you know, people can be skeptical about politicians, and that's fine. But I think I would like to give credit to the councillors in Sheffield who've got behind this, despite not really knowing what's going to come out of it. I think that feels quite different to me, to how we've been, where we've been.
Yeah, exciting times, exciting future. So moving on to, what time are we finishing, Terry? What time are we finishing this session? Is it 1:45? Totally, right, I'll move on. So Rani, I want to come to you, because you haven't had a chance to say anything yet. Where do you see the role for social enterprise in delivering these goals, and the network in particular?
I think social enterprises are uniquely placed to deliver these goals, because I think I really like the idea of reimagining how things could be done from this morning. And I think social enterprise embodied that like few other organizations do, because the very idea of starting a social enterprise already involves reimagining what it means to, you know, be an organization with a purpose, and to not be a commercial traditional business with a purpose of profit, or to not be a traditional charity with a purpose of doing good, but to reimagine how we organize ourselves in society in a way that is new and that is different. And then that leads you to a space where you share with lots of other people who have taken the same step to go somewhere new, And that's a really exciting space. It's a slightly scary space because you're never quite sure where you're going. But that sort of creates an energy on the one hand, sort of to, you know, share a space with lots of creative people, but also an urgency to move somewhere because you're not quite sure where you are. So, and also I think social enterprises, while they're all very, very different in terms of exactly what they do and why they've been constituted, they've all been constituted with a purpose to create a better world in one form or another. And we don't need to share exactly what that means, but that in itself, I think, creates a drive to, you know, move to a better future together. So ultimately, I think we've already inherently all agreed on delivering on this one way or another.
Okay, Helen, how do you see the voluntary and third sector being part of this?
I think the sector's a cornerstone because I think, as to add to what Rennie was saying, how we value the world. I think we've had that perspective, you know, it's beyond money, isn't it? We value different things. We see different value that I think been a massive issue as a sector, because I don't think the sector's been valued by government and by those kind of institutions. You know, I'm sure, and I know because I went to a very good lecture by Chris Dayson of Cresa about how the sector is understood and valued. And he talked a lot about treasury and cost benefit analysis, and that, you know, everything boils down to that. Whereas I think as a sector, we value lots of different things and we're able to hold that perspective. So I think now is a massive opportunity for us to share that perspective and model it, you know, in terms of how we deliver things and how we work with others, and bring that to life and show our partner organisations the way, actually, in a lot of cases.
Cool. Anybody else want to come in on that one? I shall move on. So last question I've got then. It's going back to something that was in Kate's presentation. If we're successful in the when we're successful in the implementation of these goals together, what do you think Sheffield's going to look like in 2035?
Are you thinking colours, John?
Colours. You can illustrate it however you like, James. I don't mean politically. No, I mean what?
I didn't even jump there.
What benefits is this going to bring? And yeah, where do you see us being positioned?
So I guess I see a successful delivery of the city goals as really being about how we have created new infrastructures and capabilities that have brought us as citizens and as organizations and as people together more with the environment around us. I think we have to be really mindful of how much the world is going to change in the next 10 years. And I don't mean that in like an ultimately bleak way, although I think we will have some challenges. I mean that in the way that humans are pretty bad at understanding exponential curves. We tend to understand exponential curves by looking backwards 10 years and then going, oh, well, it'd be like that, but plus a bit. And that's not how exponential curves work. Like, the world is going to be a radically different place in 10 years' time. And that there's going to be some great things about that. And there's going to be some challenging things about that. And what we need to do is create the capability as a city to be able to manage that change process. And if I hold any hope for the goals, it's that they are covering enough bases and inspiring enough collaboration for us to hold that change in a distributed way that is equitable and inclusive.
I think I'd just add, I love the way James sees the world, and also I don't think James ever passes the test of, I don't know if my mum would ever really understand what you're on about, but you know, probably. Anyway, I would I do think that James is absolutely right, that there is this sense of the scale of transition and change that we are going to face in the next decade and more is almost unimaginable, which is why imagination is important. Being thinking about this city in 10 years or so time, I always am drawn to thinking about the current the younger generation, the generation that are going to inherit this city, whether that's my kids or kids I meet in the job, or so thinking through their eyes of, is this a city where they feel that they've been given the tools and the support to thrive in spite of, and in fact potentially alongside all of those challenges? That feels incredibly important. And has that been done in a way that fundamentally tackles at last the deep inequities in our city, and in a way that is not a zero-sum game, not a them or them versus us, but is actually about bringing people together. And I know that sounds incredibly soft and fluffy, but I think it really, really matters. I think the way we'll navigate through these challenges is by exactly finding common cause, not shying away from challenge, and not hiding ourselves away from inequity and discrimination, but actually walking into it and saying, we want to do something about this. So I think I want to feel hopeful about a world in which that's the kind of city my kids inherit, and all of our kids inherit. And I also would love it if we could stop talking about, things that happened 30 years ago. I mean, and looking back, and we could be a city that's proud of who we are, is able to sit comfortably in its own skin and own its successes and its strengths and its uniqueness, instead of always harking back to what used to make us great.
Thank you, Renee.
It'd be great to be comfortable with not knowing where we're going, actually, because I think we don't. And I think one of the wonderful things about not having tangible hierarchical goals is also that it gives us a space to imagine that as we're going together. And I think that's the only right way to do it. But we do need to share some values about where we're going and why we're going there. And one of the things I'd really like to see, which I don't think we're that far off actually, is a city where everyone cares for one another. And again, that can mean a ton of different things. But I think if we genuinely all take the time to care for someone else regularly, be a fantastic city.
Well, I think we heard a lot about what that Sheffield will look like this morning. The 10-year lifespan discrepancy disappears. Green transport, buses came up quite a lot in our workshops. We talked about how Sheffield could become the global center for buses, like people from other cities could come and visit how well the bus infrastructure runs, which is quite comical. But yeah, some really inspiring, that Sheffield is a national forest city. Was that what it was as well? And I think what really excites me about these kinds of projects is the space that they can create for the public to come together and surface actually the dreams and visions that are already here, in this room and outside. And, with the goals, what I thought is, okay, where are the creators, the inventors, the makers, the future generations? Can they be part of a big visioning process? And to take the pressure off, say, the council and others to deliver the goals. How can Sheffield come together and, in all of its different people and ages and groups, to actually brainstorm, how do you put this into practice? What does it look like? What are those tangible visions that can build that longing that we talked about, the longing for that future? Because 10 years is a long time, so we've got to keep up the momentum and the hope, and longing and visioning can help with that.
Thank you. Helen, do you want to just finish up on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to answer it with a bit more of a basic. In 10 years' time, because of the conversations that I've led. So I've worked with 17 organisations across the city to have collaborative conversations about things that matter to them. And I would say that the thing that makes us nervous about the new, one of the speakers earlier said, as a city, we get nervous about new things. And I think the thing that's come across to me is the thing that makes us nervous about new things is that we have the dread of the same. And we have to build trust with one another and the way we work with one another to truly move into that new space, because that dread of the same keeps coming back. And for communities that I've spoken to, that dread is there, and we need to show them that what they're telling us and how they're getting involved is making a difference, is something is changing as a result. That's really important. So in 10 years' time, if we've demonstrated some things and demonstrated that to people and built trust, that will be hugely important, I think.
Lovely, thank you. Hugely hopeful. And on a personal note, can I just say, I think it's great that we've got Kate in charge, because she really does want to change things. And I know the council's only just part of it, and I know I'm giving you a hard time there, but thank you for everything you're trying to do. It's going to be transformative. Okay, we've got time for a couple of questions from down there in the audience. So who would like to go first? Come on, don't be shy. Yes, David.
Oh, fine. Yes, I'm just thinking about this 2035 city, and thinking that you could fix a lot of people's problems by giving them more money, giving them better jobs, higher paid jobs, maybe better shops. But is there a process that you have in the back of your mind that is moving Sheffield towards the kind of economy and society that perhaps I think a lot of people in this room share, the idea of circular economy, sharing society, equity, and so on? In other words, is there a way in which you can introduce benefits almost in substitution to the hard economic benefits? So things that make people proud of their city, happy with their neighborhood, content with their community and their way of life. Can those be introduced? I struggle to say as an alternative to giving people more cash in their pocket, but given that the cash in their pocket may be the big challenge for a lot of people, there's a lot of potential to make Sheffield a nicer place to live. And if we're visioning that, I'm just thinking, well, what are the tangible things that we do to make that kind of reality, if that makes sense?
It does make sense, and I think it's sort of, I want to just hold the question. I think there's important, those are the sorts of questions we need to be asking ourselves. And the then question is, so how might we all do that? So I think there are examples already in the city of communities, organisations taking responsibility for, and I include the council within that, not universally, but really trying to take responsibility for what we can do to improve the parts of the city we have agency for. We have got to have and one of the things that comes out in the work that we've done for the city goals, and the same conversations being had at the South Yorkshire level, we have got to take some responsibility, or not responsibility, we've got to look ourselves squarely in the face around our economic performance. An individual might disagree with the basic premise of capitalism, and that would be a different debate. But if you accept that we are the society we are in the world we're in, then we are massively underperforming as a region and as a city, as a core city. And that isn't something we can shy away from. And why it's frustrating is we shouldn't be. We have all the assets, we have incredible people, we have incredible seats of learning, we have a really strong startup and entrepreneurial business base. We know we suffer from far less investment than other places, but I honestly think some of that is linked, and I don't think this is naive, to our lack of story. If you think about when you're going out seeking support for your vision as a social enterprise, what buys people, what gets anybody to part with their money, their investment, to say, yeah, I'm going to back this idea, is the idea. And so I think it is really important that we have that idea as a city. If I'm talking to talking to South Yorkshire Pension Fund about investing South Yorkshire pensioners' money in South Yorkshire and in Sheffield, which instinctively they want to do, A, we've got to have some good projects for them to get behind, and B, they've got to believe that we're actually going to be able to do it and that we've got a plan and we've got a vision. So all of that I think is really important. But I would say, the question about how do we navigate a world in which we're seeking to build the prosperity of our city, but do so in a way which respects the limits of the world we live in and attempts to avoid further inequality and tackle the inequality we have. I don't know. I think on that we have to be in that curious learning, Renee's sort of, how just constantly learning and holding ourselves to account on it. So that's not really, it's a hard thing to answer, because I think we need to have, that's a conversation we could be having as groups and as communities over the course of the next while, informed by the city goals.
I think it's good to imagine prosperity in a broader way than just an economical one. And I think there's some really easy things we can do and are doing that might be more widely distributed. But just from sort of my own background, anyone can come and eat in a Foodworks cafe and pay whatever they want for their lunch. And we've got plenty of money in the city. If some people pay a bit more for their lunch, then other people can come and have lunch and pay a bit less, and it still works out. It's just a matter of us taking the effort and building the infrastructure where those resources and the wealth that exists is distributed and connected in the way that it makes a difference. And so that is one example in which you might do that and feed people without any extra resource being needed. Or for instance, over the pandemic, we connected with lots of allotment societies across the city, say, you guys love growing food and you don't know what to do with all the courgettes that pop out of your plants. Come and bring it to us and we'll feed someone with it. And hey, that feeds people as well, but also that gives people a fantastic sense of pride in themselves and in their city, because they're part of a system where, rather than feeling despondent and helpless about the state of the world and powerless to do something about it, now they have a way to do something they're passionate about, that they know makes a difference, and they feel connected and part of something good in the city. And so I think there's plenty of things we can do like that to connect people up with time, with skills, with resources. We all have something to offer. And if we create commonality where we can share what we have to offer together, we can be wealthy and we can be proud and we can be happy.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, completely agree about story. I mean, I think it's essential if we're going to cut through on a national level and bring the kind of investment and resources that we want into the city. I ended up here today as a result of being invited to Gatecrash, the event, as a result of being at one of these workshops about the city goals the other day. And we had a very active conversation, didn't we, on our table, Helen, about them all. I've been in Sheffield for 2 years, absolutely love this city. And I'm the kind of person that once something's set, I'll just commit to it and just try to make the most of it. And that's absolutely what I'm ready to do with these goals. But I have to say, they don't speak to me personally. I find them unimaginative, unaspirational, trivially sensible, to the point of being completely meaningless almost, and so on and so forth. And I was wavering about whether to say that or not, and what, because when you do say something, you want there to be something productive, right? Like a step forward. Otherwise, you're just saying something that you think. And actually, the important thing about these goals is the consensus around them. So I respect that. There's been consensus around how they've been developed, and this is what people in Sheffield have put together and want. So I'm ready to 100% commit and try to make sure that we get there in 10 years' time or 15 years' time. So the thought that came to mind for me was, and I was looking through some of those documents, you know, about the data that had informed them and so on. And they, to me, look pretty sanitized. I can't imagine having a conversation with someone in the community that I've met and then given the feedback that was given in these documents, even the real negative comments, So somehow it seems to me that there's been a level of sort of editing and bringing things together, which is fine, because I get that's partly what the point of those documents is. But I just wonder then, the thought that went through my mind when you mentioned stories, Kate, is whether we could, because this is all done now, this is all set, there's not going to be dramatic changes. That's probably a fact. Can we collect those really powerful stories from the most disadvantaged people in Sheffield, for who these goals, frankly, are probably just as meaningless and devoid of any real substance as they are to me? Can we make sure that when we're putting Sheffield out there and as a shop front for national government and for the other people who can be convinced to get that resource into this area, it's on the PowerPoint, it's not just those goals, they're there somewhere, but we can skip past them really quickly and say, actually, here's a story related to each of those goals that we collected through the consultation, or we've gone back to find those stories that fit with them. And here's real people talking about real things and creating an identity for Sheffield that is going to cut through. Because I think for me, that's the thing that would be a positive to come out of this goal setting process. I don't like them personally. I think they're vanilla, they're bland. They don't, for me, give any sense at all of Sheffield. You could put York, Oxford, Manchester, Birmingham, whatever city you wanted to put on the front of those goals, you could do. And I think they make sense. And actually, I've just looked at York's website. I've just looked at Manchester's website. I've just looked at Oxford's website. Every single one of those cities has something in it about how they did an amazing public consultation on their recent goals, and it reached stakeholders and so on and so forth. So in terms of your question halfway through about, whether other cities have done this or not, I think if we take them by their word, the three that I just randomly selected seem to believe that they have. Just can we find those stories and cut through? And also, can we have it an easy read, and can we have it accessible for people with visual impairments?
Yes to all the last. I might hand over to James from the team that have done the work on gathering this together. I think the thing that's been different, just to be really precise, is that when the conversation started, we didn't say, here is our idea, what do you think? We said, what do you love about Sheffield? What do you want for Sheffield? We asked open questions and then tried to pull that together. Now and I think that has, one of the things that was a bit disappointing, I've got to say about that, was that it's required even what you see here has required a bit of an injection of ambition. And I think that says something about the city that I think we have, as someone who kind of grew up around here, went away and come back, I think we have sort of lost our ability to shout boldly and with real ambition about what we want to be. And so that's so it's
just that there's clearly been so many amazing people involved in the process of putting this together, and that's the thing that makes me think, where is the ambition level? Why is it not, I suppose, right there where the qualities of those people are? We all know the amazing people.
I suppose what I'll let James come in on the process, but of course the process is that all those amazing people don't all agree. So part of the challenge here is, do we want an ambitious vision that alienates a big part of the city, or do we want an ambition that is imaginative and might feel a bit less ambitious, but which more people can get behind? And that is a choice, I suppose. I mean, do you want to?
Or is there a third route where we capture that disagreement and that positive anger and that positive energy, and we showcase ourselves as a city based around that? We say to people, look at us, you can see the disagreements, here they are. And we've built a structure around that that's still an amazing shop window for Sheffield that shows us up.
I think you've just found your new head of city goals. A lot of energy. It's great, but it's great to see.
To
see so much energy.
It is great to see so much energy. I suppose the other thing I'm really conscious of is the journey we need to be on as a city, which is one where there has been a lot of conflict in the city. There's been a lot of mistrust and actually there's something about how do we create spaces for a much more productive sharing of conflict and understanding of different perspectives, but also a foundation that can build trust. And I think many people who've been in the city a longer time than you or I are quite fed up of having arguments with each other onward, and that did come out, I think. But I don't know, James, do you want to say a bit more about the process? Because I don't feel like it. I mean, the team that's done the work have tried really hard not to vanillarize and edit it down, but
yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm speaking as a white man as well, so vanilla is in my DNA, so to speak. Yeah, I guess I would say, you know, there's been a long process of kind of haggling over words, as you might expect, as we've gone through iteration after iteration after iteration. I'll say that one more time, after iteration. With hundreds and hundreds of different people in lots of different spaces, some digital processes, some in-person process, some large groups, some small groups, and so on and so forth. And it's been really, really, really challenging. And I fully accept that the goals are not going to appeal to absolutely everyone. Personally speaking, the big win for me, as I mentioned earlier, is that we are not talking about outcomes. None of those goals say we're going to solve child poverty by 2035. None of those goals say we're going to get better bus services. Like, that is truly, you know, that's where I bail out, I think, when we get to that point. Capabilities, those goals describe capabilities that we need. And if you can imagine building those capabilities, if you can imagine that, then they are far from vanilla. But I appreciate what you've said, and I really value it, and I'd like to talk about it more. So let's get together. We are still nearly not quite finished this process of consultation. I take those thoughts on board. Let's see how we can make them more colourful. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We've got time for one more question as a gent, or maybe two. There's a guy at the back there.
Thank you. Hello. I'd just like to concur very much with the gentleman at the front who is unmotivated by what was being proposed. And I'd also like to refer to what the lady has been saying earlier, that we need to relate to the world we live in. You said that earlier in your thing. The world we live in is ecological. And the species we are is ecological, and the well-being and the sustainability that we seek is ecological. And so, without being arrogant, I've spent 4 decades evaluating economics basic concepts in terms of ecological functional qualities. That sounds technical, but it's not. And at this point, it's fundamentally intuitive, because we are ecological as a species, and we've got, all of us, an intuitive capability of assessing things, which is always subjugated by the economic imperative. And at that point, if I might, Phoebe, refer to your wonderful reference to imagination, which is the complement of our intuitive or a manifestation of our intuitive capability. And so I would propose, and it's got to start somewhere, but we have to full on look at economics. We talk about prosperity, and although we are 6th out of 192 countries in terms of wealth already. So for the future, and for the Antarctic ice sheet and the Amazon and all the rest of it that subtend our very living, we've got to start somewhere to look economics and its conceptual edifice smack in the face at some point. And with that, I would concur with what that gentleman was articulating. Thank you.
I'm not sure that was a question, but I know the ecological side of things is very much at the heart of everything that City Goals are trying to do, Rennie. Just want to get that one, and then we've got one more question after that. So.
2 observations. One is there's an effort to be made here to change how we work from a hierarchical way of working, where a council takes a top-down approach to, you know, and the council is what's identified as sort of the leadership of the city. But actually, that's not what this is about. And I think it's frustrating that, you know, we all need to take some responsibility here. We always talk about the council needing to be more open, needing to be collaborative, and here's an opportunity for a process where you know, which has truly not been led in particular by any one organization. The councils try to take responsibility to facilitate and to support, but so have a lot of other organizations. And then it's up to us now to stop asking the same question of Kate and Tom all the time about how they are going to deliver this. They're not. We are. So let's stop asking that question, because we are self-confirming the very thing that we've been complaining about for bloody decades, pardon my French. And the second thing, is, I don't think this is about those outcomes. I think this is a process. The value of this is the fact that we are having the conversations, the fact that we've had these workshops, the fact that during those workshops, and I've been at some of those, we've already made connections, we've already found commonality, we've already discussed so much more than you will ever see in a PowerPoint presentation. We've already taken so much action and made so many plans to deliver on this and more. And so the way to do this and the way to engage with this is to be part of those conversations and to not just judge this as a PowerPoint. Get involved in a conversation, help deliver on them, and that's how we're going to get where we want to be, whatever that looks like in 10 years' time.
Thank you, Rene. Benoit, last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'll be very quick because I'm aware of time. It's just something that occurred to me, and I'm a general troublemaker, so I'll try not to.
Try and frame it as a question, mate.
So it just occurs to me that we're at a panel about social enterprise, and that in a way the council run as a business. Are we talking about turning the council into a social enterprise? That's my question. Sorry, Kate.
Yeah, I think if we were a business, we would be not. Yeah, I don't think. I think I think there's a lot we can learn as a very large, long established. In fact, I think there's lots that most very large, long established institutions anywhere in the world can learn from social enterprise. And this is probably a really good place to think about, which is about the power of, you know, getting the right people in the room, caring enough about something to make it happen, but doing so with that entrepreneurial spirit, that spirit that you're going to combine the you know, the sort of understanding of a bit of set commercial sense and nous, but also for good, I think is something that we can learn an awful lot from in lots of our organisations. And some of the challenges that we have are to really be, again, I suppose, speaking to Rene's points, which I thought were really, really powerful, about creating the conditions for a city that's learning all the time and evolving and iterating and being curious. Because I suppose that's the other thing, again, speaking to gentlemen's points around what we can learn from ecology. It's the networks, it's the connections, it's the sort of mycelium under the ground that we need to build in the city. That idea that we're all building together and finding answers to problems. And I do hope that through that work, it might be that in future, when we look back at these goals, we all think, well, they were a bit vanilla, weren't they? And they weren't very Sheffield. And look what we did as a result of coming together around them. It was so much better than we imagined.
Excellent. I started with an old cliche. I'm going to finish with one as well. If you keep on thinking about things the way you've always thought about it, you'll keep on getting what you've always got. So let's get on board and embrace this in our own individual way, and we'll move forward together. Can I big hand for the panel? James, Rene, Kate, Helen, Phoebe. And just one closing thing before Terry drags me off the microphone. Can I just personally ask everybody, if you get nothing else out of today, please go away and do one thing based on what you've heard today, one positive thing. That's going to be a massive amount of progress already. Thank you.
Having tried to keep to time all day, I'm going to ask those of you that can hang around to indulge me for about another 5 minutes. I kind of welcome the tension in the room around the city goals. I think, if we as a sector aren't going to feel that we want something to be more ambitious and we're going to agitate for something a bit, along those lines, then I don't know what other sector will. But I do really think there's an opportunity through these goals to create a common identity that brings us together and helps pave the way to the new economy that we've all been striving to achieve for so long. And I also think it's the responsibility of the city social enterprise to collectively demonstrate that we can drive the success of these goals, galvanizing the changes that need to happen across the city to deliver the changes necessary for Sheffield, for our country, for the planet. So I just wanted to get that bit in there. I don't know about anyone else, but I kind of like to do this every week. I'm saying, so yeah, so we definitely. Yeah, don't think we can afford it though, can we, John? But I definitely think there's something there that this needs to happen more than annually, and that's something I'll take to the board, and we'll, because I think especially now with this kind of these sort of changes we're going through, it's really important. And for me, at least, I love being around kind of panelists and workshop facilitators that I'm learning from, that I can that I trust their judgment, that I trust their vision. I think something that causes me so much anxiety today is, when you look particularly in the political fields, you're looking at people. I can't even stand to look at them because, people you just fundamentally, you have no trust in. You have no trust in their capabilities to deliver. When I listen to the likes of James is someone I want to rally behind. So if James is here and putting those city goals capabilities together, then I'm on board. I'm on board. Whatever we need to do, we can do that. And of course, it's scary. It's scary, when the UN General Secretary saying that when at a time when we should be accelerating action, there's backtracking, we're hurtling towards disaster with eyes wide open. But I'd like to, when I was kind of researching about the IDGs, when I found Phoebe, there was a quote there that kind of stood out for me, and it's from Indy Johar, and he said, "The darkness is an invitation for us to step into greatness." And I get emotional, and that's where we're at. And that's where we're at. And I think we all need to, we need to recognise that we are the vanguard of this movement. And I've said that a few times today. And I think, the change really needs to come from us. And, I'd like kind of next year, for us to be in a room that's twice the size, and the year after that, the other side. Because if we kind of look at those city goals are all about social enterprise, okay? All about social enterprise. It runs through the threads all the way, As we move forward, businesses are going to have to become more social. This movement is charities are going to have to become more enterprising. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of things. When I was kind of researching this kind of speech, I introduced my 10-year-old, getting emotional again. Oh, right. I introduced my 10-year-old nephew to, don't know if anyone's seen on the Moral Imaginations website, there's kind of like Phoebe's created this kind of train metaphor to describe where we're at. And it's really powerful. And I introduced that to my 10-year-old, and I think there's something really great about that, but something really sad about that, because I introduced him to it, and I didn't introduce his parents to it, because I felt he was the one who was going to be more receptive to it. He was the one who was really feeling the sense of where we're at. And then off the back of that, he introduced me to the concept of the overview effect that he'd seen on a YouTube short, like 30 seconds or something like that. But it resonated with him. And I remember I brought this up with Phoebe, who said, actually, when she was coming up with the ideas for moral imaginations, the overview effect was something that really kind of influenced that. So for a 10-year-old to grasp that, I think is really powerful. And for those who aren't aware of the overview effect, it's the effect that astronauts experience when they see the Earth from above, when they see it for what it truly is, that being a fragile ball of life hanging in the endless void of space, held together by a paper-thin atmosphere. From space, national boundaries vanish, the conflicts that divide us seem unimportant, and the need to protect this tiny blue dot becomes both obvious and imperative. Now, there's going to come a point where we have to reach this sense of collective enlightenment. We don't know when that's going to, be, but it's going to have to come. There's, it's inevitable. But to have any chance of success, we need to be working together. We need to be working together across generations. We need to be working together across sectors. We need to be sharing best practices. We need to be aligning our resource to the most useful collective action. And that kind of goes back to a lot of stuff that James has been talking about. We need to be engaging in peer support networks. We need to be building the community infrastructures necessary to keep us resilient and motivated and engaged. We in the voluntary community and social enterprise sector are the vanguard. We are the trailblazers in this process, and we need to work together to share the problem. When we work on things in isolation, we can forget that each of these problems and therefore its solutions are related. If we're going to be successful in developing a more sustainable world, then we need to connect the dots between different projects and create ecosystems of solutions and work together. I see the role of the Sheffield Social Enterprise Network here in all this to facilitate these connections between you all and to support you to develop the skills and knowledge that you need to be the change the city needs. So if there's one thing that I can ask out of this, it is sign up to our SADACCA program. It's engage with the support we've got. It's engage with the peer networking and peer mentoring opportunities. It's work with us. Tell us if there's stuff that you need that you don't think we're delivering in the right way. We want to be working with you to develop the resilience and growing the network to deliver the changes that we need. So just to summarize, I've been threatening for a while, for people close to me to get a Star Wars analogy in here. The reason being I was quite ill with a fever last Tuesday. And I'm usually, even if I'm like in bed, I'll still be working. I couldn't do anything. So I reverted to what, I did as a kid, and I feel rotten, is I watched Star Wars. And I found like a docuseries on Disney called Light and Magic, which documents the story of kind of the creation of Industrial Light and Magic, which is the company that George Lucas had to create to be able to create all the kind of visual effects that at that point were impossible. So to quote George Lucas, when making the original Star Wars, he said, "You've got to be persistent under impossible conditions." One of his editors at the time, feeling an imposter syndrome, said to him, "I've never worked on anything this big before." Lucas's answer was, "Don't worry, nobody has." On making Star Wars, George Lucas knew he had a problem. He didn't know how to solve it, but he knew that if I take this person and that person and I put them together, then maybe I get to the solution. Collaboration is fundamental in this process, not just in kind of driving the operational changes necessary, but it's also a vital component of sustaining mental health in the workplace. Employees engaged in meaningful collaboration experience a sense of community and support. The connection combats feelings of isolation, fosters senses of belonging, all crucial for employee well-being. And when we feel despair and we feel that the odds are stacked against us, remember the fact that the Ewoks were able to defeat the Empire using only ropes, rocks, and trees. It doesn't matter how much power you have set against you, the will of the people is strong and we will always win. Thank you. But no one thought there'd be anything about Ewoks in the last sentence, did they?
I am not going to say anything beyond that, but I am going to go home and watch The Return of the Jedi right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so inspired, and I think we collaboratively have an amazing opportunity to shape this city and this world, actually. So thank you all so much for collaborating with us today, for bringing such enthusiasm, such ideas, such imagination, do I dare say. I just wanted to say, as director of SEN, thank you so much, Terry and Pete. Pete is our unsung hero. You're a legend, Pete. Thank you so much for organising today. Terry, thank you for leaving with us with that. That's going to go with me. Fantastic. Well done, Terry. Really good stuff. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, our workshop providers, to Phoebe, to Kate for the keynote speeches. Everyone, let's go and do it. Let's really change the world. Well done, everyone. Thank you.